Hi everyone, welcome to the Racist Law on Everything. Hopefully we have sorted audio issues for you. I've got my microphone hooked up to an XLR cable now, rather than a dodgy USB. So that seems to have solved things. And yeah, how are you going, Knowles? Are you liking the weather that's been heating up?
No.
No, it wasn't like too bad today, but come next weekend, it's already getting up to like 37, 38. So
Yeah, man, fuck
yeah,
that shit. Just fuck that
yeah.
shit.
We've got a bit of prep today, actually, on what that is going to mean for the electricity grid and whether or not people are going to be able to afford to keep the aircon on the whole time. But yeah, look, we're going to get straight into it because it has been a big week, actually. Our prep is chock full, 34 pages of stuff. And we're going to start off with immigration. And by the way, just because we have a lot of news doesn't mean we have any good news. It's all bad, pretty
Why'd
much.
you come here for good news? When was the
So
last time we did good news?
I can't remember, but look, so mandatory trigger warning before I get into this. So look, I'm sure most listeners are now aware of what's been called a landmark decision made by the High Court of Australia, our highest court in the land. This regards a case that was actually decided 20 years ago. That's known as Al-Kateb. And this was the case where it was deemed legal to hold someone in detention indefinitely.
Yeah.
And, that simply just means, well, hypothetically, you could actually keep them in there forever. Now, the government decided to fight this in the court because what it basically is for is when you've got people who can't be deported because they're stateless, perhaps, or negotiations are ongoing with other countries to accept them. Or
It's 999 times out of 10, it's some African saying he's gay.
a lot of the time, yeah. It tends to be criminals. Other countries
Yep.
don't want to accept them back because
Yeah.
they're a danger, so we get stuck with them. So, did you say no?
Yeah, no. Yes, that is true. In fact,
Oh,
the ABC's been detailing this case. They've been doing the sob story for this West African rapist. It's like,
okay,
oh, it's
I
all in the
don't know if that's
past.
the West African rapist, but this, like the person this was fought on behalf of in the High Court, was someone who's just been known. You've just got this legal code out here, NZYQ, so we don't know who this guy is. But we do know his profile, which is he's a stateless Rohingya man. The Rohingya, remember, are the ethnic Bangladeshis who reside in Myanmar, formerly
Yep.
Burma. And, they're not too liked over there. Myanmar really shows you how good multiculturalism goes when you put a whole bunch of different ethnic groups together sharing the
They
same
released Facebook over
plot
there.
of land.
They released Facebook over there, paid for people to have it, and within 48 hours, there was a fucking ethnic cleansing.
Yeah, yeah. But look, the reason why this guy is stateless, it's not because he's a Rohingya. The reason is because he has been convicted of raping a 10-year-old boy. Okay? So this was the person that these human rights lawyers decided to fight on behalf of. And right now, he is free. So this turned over 20 years of precedent, overturning the case of Al-Kateb, meaning that indefinite detention, no matter what the circumstances are, is illegal in Australia. So this meant that around 83 people, there's possibly more. I know one report said that there was perhaps 92 people in Australia who are being held under indefinite detention. But anyway, last I checked the ABC, they said there was 83, most of which were actually released within hours of the
Yeah.
decision occurring, because you better believe that those lawyers were all ready to go and get these people out of jail, or get them out of detention, I should say. So yeah, this is a big thing. not only for the people that we have now, the 83 people who have been released, but what this is going to mean into the future.
Yeah.
It's going to mean you're going to have a lot of more criminals attracted to Australian shores because they know that if they can be deemed to be stateless and therefore would require indefinite detention, well, Australia is suddenly a much more attractive destination for them because you
Yeah.
won't even be held in detention. You'll be allowed out into the community.
Yeah, no, it's like Jesus fucking Christ, we've got the little boy's butthole pathway to citizenship.
Right. So
Fuck. Fuck.
let's just I just want to give some examples. So yeah, like I said, it's around 83 up to 92 people who've been released, and I know and quite rightly, people will say, well, look, this is still kind of a drop in the ocean because the real problem is legal immigration. Of course,
Yep.
and we got some stuff on that too. But what you have to remember here is that pretty much anyone who is in indefinite detention in Australia is a serious criminal. They tend to be violent and sexual offenders, okay, including the man who this case was actually fought on behalf of. He's a homosexual rapist. So
That's a
it
redundancy.
really, what?
That's a redundancy.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go through a few of the other ones here just to kind of give people an idea of the caliber of person that we've just let out of detention. So you've got Aliv Awa Yawari. This guy was a violent sex predator who had a record of attacking elderly women in their homes, and the judge branded him a danger to the Australian community. So he was suddenly free on Monday, thanks to the High Court decision. He was released, and he stood outside Perth City Motel. He's 65 years old, by the way, so he has just like been doing this kind of shit his whole life. And he told reporters that he had been fighting the whole time.
What?
Yeah, fighting for his because he thinks he's innocent, right? No, he had a
That
record
that is
of
such a specific crime, like to make up or to frame someone for.
yeah, and by the way, so one of his victims was bashed in the neck with a walking stick after being indecently, in other words, sexually assaulted. This guy targeted old women. That's where the walking stick comes in. That's why that was there. Okay. He basically would sexually assault and bash up old grannies. Charming. And now he's free.
We got the fucking Gilf Hunter over here.
Yeah. So now we've actually got this guy. Here's another example. This isn't so bad because we're probably going to get rid of him soon. But this is a guy called Surul Azhar Umar. He was just released from Sydney's Villawood Detention Centre. And this is a guy who's a suspected hitman, actually. So he had been in detention for 9 years. He's 50 years old now, and he was arrested in Australia in 2015 after being convicted and sentenced to death in absentia by a Malaysian court because he's said to have murdered a 28-year-old Mongolian model and translator in the country.
What?
Now, yeah, so if you're wondering, it was said to be politically based too. I'm sorry, I haven't really looked into the specifics of this case. It's probably pretty complex, but all you need to know is this guy was a hitman. He killed a 28-year-old model. So look, why hasn't he been sent back to Malaysia thus far? Well, because Australia will not deport anyone of any citizenship if they're facing the death penalty in the country they would be sent to. So you see, this guy was convicted of this crime and sentenced to death in absentia in a Malaysian court. So that would mean that basically what he has to do is just live out the rest of his days effectively jailed in Australia. I say just send him back.
Yeah,
he can face
just
the
get it over
firing
with.
squad, right?
I don't want to have to pay
But
for my taxpayer dollars go to pay for this motherfucker's food and board. I'd just rather like televise his execution.
right, so now he's just out there free. Now, look, he's probably because of the fact that he's a hitman. You got to pay him to do things like this, politically
Mm.
motivated, etc. He might not cause so much trouble. But again, it gives you an idea of the type of person who'd be released.
I don't like professional or not. I don't think I want people who murder people in this country, especially when there's an option to not have them.
Right, right. Um, so another one was Aliwa Yawari, who is an Afghan man who attacked 3 women and was also convicted of assault. And the list goes on. Okay, there's a lot more here. I won't go through all of them. So, what have we got going on now? What's the response to this? I should point out that the government did oppose this. The Albanese government still, at least on paper, is supportive of indefinite detention. So they were pooling resources to fight this in the High Court, and they were caught off guard by it. So Peter Dutton, obviously is seizing on this moment. He's saying that the government should have drafted legislation beforehand to deal with that event, which is the decision that we've got now. Yeah, he's probably right. It seems like the government was caught off guard here. They weren't expecting the High Court to make this decision. Even though, as we know, the High Court has been increasingly making shittier decisions, such as finding that people of part Aboriginal descent who
Mm.
have no citizenship here can't be deemed aliens, right? And so they can always just come back here no matter what they've been convicted of. So yeah, I don't think it should have come as a massive surprise. And because of the fact that the government was caught off guard, they've had to kind of stay in Parliament over time and rush new legislation through. So Peter Dutton was saying that politicians should stay in Canberra until more legislation has been passed, because they believe that the legislation so far does not go far enough. So what you've actually got so far, I'm going from memory here, I don't think I wrote this in the prep, was that they have to wear ankle bracelets. That's really it.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Wow, that's a lot. Like that's really brutal.
Yeah. So these people who have been out there convicted of murdering people and raping people, don't worry, because apparently they're going to keep their electronic trackers on. And then there's other things like, they have to regularly report to a police station and that kind of thing. Now, Australian Federal Police already said that they were going to do that. They didn't have a plan for ankle bracelets, but they did say that all of these people, some of which have been released on visas, various visas that they've had to hand over to them, that have conditions on them that, make it so that they do have to report to a station and things like that, so that they can be monitored and we know what they're doing. So what the government did here was not really much more than what police had already done. Peter Dutton has made that argument as well, and he's saying that there is some sort of legislative way to put them back in detention. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not sure if he did outline that kind of detail.
How the
But
rapist is already out of the box.
yeah. So it may well be, because Parliament is still sitting now. I think they're supposed to adjourn this week. Peter Dutton wants it to continue, not only because of this and getting through more legislation to deal with these, 80 to 93 people who've been released, but also because of the rising tide of anti-Semitism in Australia. So,
Oh God.
which of course we have a lot of
Yes, we do.
stories on today as well. Yeah, so there you go. This is really, really shitty news. It may only be a small amount of people, but they are very dangerous, violent, people, sexual predators, etc.
And
And
there's going to be
it
more.
only means you're going to get more of them, and you're going to
Yeah.
attract more of them to come to Australia in the first place.
I will reiterate. Raping a boy is now a pathway to being in this country.
That's right. Because you can come over here, and then it's deemed that you're stateless or, facing the death penalty in your home country or something like that. And then they have to actually let you out into the community. They can't even lock you up for security's sake. It just boggles the mind. Okay. So we got some other stuff on immigration too. Like I said, it's all bad. So the Commonwealth had been taken to court by a guy who was known as Yasir. That's not his real name. He's anonymous. Now, the reason why, this was a guy who was in um, immigration detention. And sometimes when they take you out to, say, bring you to a hospital or whatever, they got to put you in handcuffs. Now, I'd never heard of this before, but apparently this guy suffers from handcuff PTSD, right? This is meant to be a real
What?
thing. Yes. Yeah. Handcuff PTSD.
Yeah, no
So,
one take him to the fucking BDSM orgy.
so just to quote what the ABC said about this, it said, Yasir's PTSD response, which included seizures, is a result of being tortured and handcuffed throughout his childhood. His lawyer alleged that these actions were unlawful and amounted to disability discrimination. That is, making it compulsory for him to wear the handcuffs. What
Lord,
else
just
are they
put him on a
supposed to do?
leash.
I mean, they have to restrain you some way, don't you?
Yeah.
It goes,
Roll him out like Hannibal Lecter.
yeah. So,
Put him in a straitjacket. That's always an option.
I mean, obviously, what happened here was the Commonwealth knew that they were heading in the direction of a loss in the court. So they settled out of court. The settlement remains confidential. However, a statement was released by Yasir's lawyers saying that he is really happy with the outcome. Yeah. So I suspect he got a lot of money. Because they treated him, they didn't take into account his handcuff PTSD.
We should just walk him around and get him one of those fucking kink puppy suits you see at fucking gay bars. Just walk him around in that. There we go.
Oh, man.
Problem solved. Problem fucking solved.
I've seen fuckers wear those in Northbridge.
I fucking know. Oh my god. I can't be too loaded around them because I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah. All right, well, let's now talk about a country that you might not even have heard of. I think last week they made their debut on the Racist War, and that's Tuvalu. So
yeah.
Tuvalu is a Pacific island country. It is very, very small. The entire population of this island is only around 11,000 people. So,
Yep.
this, as we probably mentioned last week, is to do with China's geopolitical incursion into the Pacific Islands, and what Australia and America, of course, are trying to do about it. Very much it goes under the guise of just funding for climate change. We give them money because they're low-lying countries below sea level, and they're the ones most susceptible to the horrors of climate change. As we know, a lot of that is simply just bribe money.
It is.
It's cover for saying, okay, look, we just want you on side, and we don't want you to harbor any Chinese troops or anything like that. We want you to remain pro-Western and leave China out of the Pacific. That's essentially what it is. Okay, so we now have a new agreement that has been signed with Tuvalu that will see 280 people per year given a special mobility pathway to live, work, and study in Australia. In return for that, Australia will have effective veto power over Tuvalu's security arrangements with any other country. Okay.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? That just means we're going to veto any cooperation with China. Okay. And that means now that 280 extra people get to come into our already broken immigration system in Australia. So there you go. And again,
Oh,
I
by
know
the
that's
way,
it's a little drop in the ocean, but it's all adding up. Another 280 people per year.
oh, dude, Jesus Christ! I looked into Tuvalu's like fucking the climate change thing, right? You know what they're basing the quote unquote shrinking of their country on?
What?
Uninhabited sandbars they register as landmass. Central Tuvalu mainland, has actually grown by 2.9% between 2014 and 2023.
Are you talking about the landmass or the
Yeah,
population?
the landmass.
The landmass. Okay.
It grew by 73 hectares between 2014 and 2023, trending with previous growths in the country since its founding and surveying. So it's actually the
Yeah.
mainland's growing, and then they turn around and say, "Oh, but look, these sandbars are getting eroded that we don't live on because they're just tiny sandbars. So therefore, we're shrinking." But even if you take them into account as the total landmass, it's still growing.
Right. I mean, this is actually what all these Pacific Island nations do, aren't they? They're like, we're literally shrinking because of rising sea levels.
Yeah, no, that's the narrative. That's the narrative they're running with.
Therefore, give me money because
Yeah.
it's Western nations' fault for polluting too much.
Yeah, like use this as the guise to give me like political bribe money.
And that's absolutely what they're doing. So, well, here's another country that our listeners might not have heard of, Kiribati. So, oh, and also Nauru. Here in Australia, we know
Yeah,
know
well,
about Nauru because they do our offshore immigration detention processing. But these are also two low-lying Pacific countries who I'm sure are complaining that they're shrinking as well, and that there are rumors that they're going to sign a very similar agreement, meaning that they get a X amount of their own citizens who get to come freely to Australia and work and study and everything, so long as Australia has control over their security, their national
yeah.
security decisions.
We keep China out of your country on the behest of the gay disco,
Yeah,
and you get to come here and pick fruit and
yeah,
eat
that's
KFC.
that's what it is. And I mean, for the most part, these Pacific Island nations are receptive to those kind of deals. Really the only one that has them in was the Solomon Islands. And we know that
Yeah.
that was
Well,
like
that's
a
because China
scandal.
gave them a better deal.
They did, yeah. And
That's why. That's solely why. It's not because like they're principled or anything or really love G. It's just because China just put more money down on the table than we could.
right. Well, I mean, yeah, why else would we now be scrambling and giving all this bribe money and free visas away to these to
Yeah.
these small nations? Like, it's pretty obvious.
No, and the fucking visas, the visas are just for more free money because sure they go and work, earn Australian dollars that have like massive buying power in their country, and then they get taxed on it in their home country. Because
Yep.
all of the islands and all the islands in the Solomon Archipelago pretty much have the same fucking tax policy, which is even if you're working in another country, you are still paying tax to us. Very similar to the American system as well.
Right. All right. So look, last story. Well, we've got some stuff on foreign workers, but just on the overall pace of change of immigration in Australia, we've got some new figures out from the Reserve Bank. So they found from the beginning of this year to September, so 9 month period, that the Australian population has grown by about 2.5%. That's a lot. So that is almost double the 4 decade pre pandemic average rate. So, that shows all the catching up that we had to do once the COVID restrictions were wound back. So, um, in that 9 month period, just to kind of give more perspective here, that actually means an extra 654,000 people that is even bigger than some of those other estimates. Because remember, they were saying 600,000 people in a year. This is only in a 9-month period.
Yep.
So a lot of those estimates were actually were off. There's more. There's more people than you bloody think are coming in here.
Yeah, fuck your
So,
Tartarian theory. Here's a real fucking mud flood.
yeah, migrants are accounting for more than 80% of the biggest jump in residents. And it's actually the equivalent of taking in the entire population of Tuvalu every 7 days. So, yeah.
Fucking Christ.
Now, talking about the economics of that, so the RBA is saying its forecast for GDP growth this year has gone from 0.9% in August to 1.6%. And that is all to do with artificially pumping it up with these numbers. Doesn't mean that wages or living standards are improving. It simply means we're getting more people who bring more money over here, and that increases GDP. So, yeah, the government can come out and say, well, the economy grew X amount in the past year, even though it didn't really. You just put more
No.
consumers into the economy. Okay.
Well,
So
that's how we grow our economy. We don't like innovate and make new industries within inside our own country. We just bring more people to process more equipment and services. That's it.
Right. Okay. Let's move on to foreign workers now. So you have a prominent anti-slavery group is currently working in Australia's big industries like construction and retail. And they're looking for more Australian businesses to be captured under the law regarding domestic modern slavery. So this anti-slavery group, they're called Informed 365. They said that there is a Chinese state-sponsored modern slavery in Xinjiang in China, where a key component of solar panels are produced. They've said that while global action was needed, there was still 40,000 slaves operating in Australia. So these...
Yeah.
I mean, look, what this means is...
They're all slaves.
Well, when we say slaves, we're not talking about people in chains who are whipped and, that kind of stuff. We're talking about a more kind of modern form of it.
We're talking about debt, entrapment, getting your entire income paid back and rent and board. Systems which will take the money that you've earned from doing X labor and funnel it back into the hands of the person you did the labor for.
Right. So what this group, Inform 365, wants to do is lower the threshold in terms of how big a business is. So, and then they are covered by those anti-slavery laws. That means that they're subject to more regulation and inspection on their labor practices. So they want to reduce that from $100 million to $50 million. Just meaning that, a lot more businesses would then be monitored to make sure that they're not breaking labor laws. And like Nolsey said, it's to do with cashback stuff like handing back your wages and just being underpaid and all the clever ways that they're able to underpay you. So, they may not be in chains or whatever, but they estimate there's 40,000 of them currently operating in Australia.
Yep.
Okay. Now, last thing on foreign workers is, we've got some new figures on engineers in Australia. So, as we very often say...
Autism levels rising.
So, people who come here with engineering qualifications, and they obviously want to work as an engineer in Australia, it's finding that 2/3 of Australia's engineers have been born overseas, but many of them around half of those have moved from work to work in engineering. All right. So when if you look at Australian-born engineers, they are much much more likely to actually find a job, right? So what that ends up meaning is that these people end up taking working class jobs instead. So, you know, as we've definitely argued many times, middle class professions like engineers, doctors, lawyers, etc., have been able to insulate themselves from
Yep.
uh, the competition of a global labor market. In other words, they've avoided having more lawyers come in to compete with their jobs, more doctors, more engineers, etc. And that is still happening to a large extent, as we can see here.
Destroy the Australian Engineers Charter. Destroy it and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like unions are the only ones who, engage in a kind of economic protectionism for their members. All the professional bodies do it as well.
Yeah.
You know, they just don't have the same tactics. Like they don't go on strike and things like that.
Oh,
It's
and
yeah,
not that expect like explicitly for engineers. Not that this is going to be not that this is a protection now. By the way, you're just seeing the fact that engineers from around the world where um, like stressing this as much as I possibly fucking can, um, got their qualifications from degree mills. We've now recognized India, and we've talked about this before.
right.
It's basically over. The hourglass has been turned over. It's only a matter of the grains falling.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what I was gonna bring up was that like I wasn't really sure if these figures would shed any light on how that's going in terms of absorbing Indians with engineering qualifications. Because with more of them being recognized, you would expect more of them to be being employed as engineers and, leaving their Uber job, whatever it was that they were doing before. So do you, because you know about more of this than me, like, do you still see the trend going where more of these engineers will actually become engineers? Or will it just
I've
kind of stay
more or
stagnant?
less I'm going to give this with the biggest caveat. I've more or less isolated myself from that industry. And that is on purpose. One, it makes me a little bit less
Well, look,
fragile, but
do you think that the free trade agreement we've made with India, and we've since amended to be even more generous, is going to result in more Indian engineers in
oh
Australia,
no,
or
already has, already
it
has.
has?
I was gonna say like this is now. I'm staying away from the personal with this because I'm no longer in that industry. But I've spoken to coworkers, like old coworkers who are still in that industry, and they're talking about having to blow out projects that've been assigned because the team of engineers that they're either directing or managing or being the senior engineer for are all Indian, and
Right.
they're all getting paid fuck all. But that's fine for them. The Australian dollar has more buying power back home, where they're sending remittances back to mommy, and yeah, I could get into a tangent about how cringe fucking adult Indians sound when they talk about their parents. Um, but yeah, no, it's already there. It's already there. You got like engineers from India who are on like 80, 85, 90K in entry level and now management positions who are completely and utterly fucking up projects royally. And it's taking
Yeah.
like the white guy in the room to go and patch things back together. It's
Hmm.
already a problem. As a, when I got out of the fucking, the studying process, um, I was expecting to, as like a total greenhorn, probably earn about like 92,000 a year. That's not going to be the
Not,
case for any engineers coming out now.
yeah, and I mean that's what is going to politicize a lot of them, and dare I say,
Yep.
radicalize some of them. Which, yeah, I mean, I've said before. I mean, very often people say, we will only hit critical mass once we get enough middle class people in our movement. You know, it's mainly a working class movement. It has been for a long time. Perhaps because working class people are the ones most affected. Well, not perhaps. That is why. You know,
Yes.
they've been the ones who have had their jobs and their communities under threat for so long, and they've had too many middle class people turn their noses up at them and dismiss them as unsophisticated bogans.
Well, it's just having the capital to actually make, like, to collectively make some inroads into politics, or some inroads into the governing bodies of regulation. Um, the working class just simply doesn't have that. Now we also face another ticking time bomb of, will these now middle class people actually figure out what the fuck is going on before they're impoverished too?
I really hope so. I mean,
I fucking hope so too.
it's kind of like when you meet a white South African who's still actually liberal. You know, you just think, how in God's name could you possibly hold these kind of views, considering the environment that you came from? So I hope that the white Australian middle class isn't that recalcitrant and actually can see reality for what it is. So, yeah, I mean, so
Yeah.
what the figures that we're giving you today, you can probably expect that trend to go backwards. In other words, a lot of the engineers who are coming over here are going to start moving into the professions. But
Yeah.
I'll give the figures right now though in terms of what the data looks like at the moment. So, Australia has 433,353 workers with engineering qualifications. 15,612 engineers were unemployed in 2021, and 190,000 worked in other occupations, with 3,200 quitting the profession to work in other fields every year. So there you go. Vast bulk of them, of course, who are moving, who are unemployed, tend to be foreigners. So, despite these qualifications that they have, 1,000 engineers were working as gardeners or landscapers, 800 as couriers, 2,500 as restaurant managers or chefs, 350 as data entry operators, and more than 800 worked as postal sorters or delivering mail. 1,000 worked in call centers, 320 were dressmakers, and 800 worked as painters or tilers. They're not even related industries,
Nope,
you know?
they're not. And they'll paint this as some sob story, like, oh god, we need to recognize more fucking engineers. And it's like, even if you look at the what we did with India, we only recognized like qualifications from a handful of like their best universities. Still not high quality enough, by the way. Um, and then now we're just going to get the sob story of the Dravidian with the piece of calligraphy from Cow Shit Eaters University,
Yeah.
working as a
And
courier.
that's right. I mean, so you're just going to be getting like Pajit and shitskin labor around the board in every industry, whether it's working class, middle class, whatever.
You're going to be
It's
getting
going
the
to be around
type
the
of
board.
You're going to be getting the type of Indian that people generate with those AI image generators, literally blasting off into space with a shit rocket.
Yeah, and I mean, look, also, I think what happened with Optus last week, that is like something that we just don't deal with in the West usually. You don't have an
Oh, and
outage on such an enormous scale. But third world and deindustrialized countries like South Africa, they have stuff like that happen.
all the
So,
time.
that is just a sign of what's to come, I think.
Well, yeah, like and by the way, you know the Optus situation was related to like fucking like literal fucking shit like shit race because Jerry Harvey Norman is coming up to bat for them. So that means that something has
Oh,
personally
man.
affected his interests.
Fuck's sake.
What is his interests again?
Hmm? What
Shit
do you
race.
mean?
Getting as much shit race into Australia as possible. That's his big thing, the population Ponzi.
Yeah. About the only businessman you have speaking out against it is Dick Smith.
Yeah.
He's like the only like kind of honest one. Um, uh, so, no, we will talk about Optus. Just before we do, just on foreign students, an economist maybe you've heard of. His name is Bruce Chapman. He's actually the economist who designed Australia's HEX system, the student loan scheme. He's saying that there should be a $1 billion a year levy on international student fees. So I'll just read out what he said here. He said, "Isn't it then opposite that taxpayers should share some of this revenue?" Talking about how much big education pulls in every year via a small levy. Basic social welfare and economics tell us that the case is incontestable. So, um, polling has showed that a lot of people support this, which would be a tax of around 5 to 10% uh, on international student fees, and that would raise $500 to $1 billion a year for the government. Now, of course, the universities don't like that. Something you have to keep in mind here, and I think that Bruce Chapman mentioned this, was that international students still actually have about half their fees paid for by the taxpayer.
Yeah.
Okay. They're still subsidized. All right. So what he's saying here is that just by having that tax, it means that the taxpayer is actually getting a little bit more of a return on that. Okay. International students may pay extra, but they are still subsidized. So, yeah, he's got a very good point.
Make him pay it all.
Yeah. And also, I always get these ones confused, whether it's elastic or inelastic. But he said that would not actually reduce the amount of foreign students coming to Australia. I think that's
Elastic.
inelastic. Oh, elastic, is it? Yeah, but basically meaning when you tamper with the price, it still doesn't really affect the demand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
so like non-elastic is like a fixed finite resource that any change in like how it operates can like will tangibly decrease like how much it's bought, sold, serviced, etc. Elastic means that you've got space to fuck with the price. It's stretchable.
Right. Yeah, bringing me back to year 12 economics now. I remember studying all this stuff back then, a long time ago. Okay, so let's talk a bit about cybersecurity and communications. So, of course, we're going to talk a bit about Optus. So they have put out a statement explaining, or at least giving their side of the story as to why the outage did happen, which remember affected about 10.2 million people and around 400,000 businesses. So they said the network was affected by changes to routing information from an international peering network. And that was around 4:05 a.m. I remember Kyber was telling me that they tend to do firmware updates very early in the morning, like around 4 or 5 o'clock. So this was following a routine software upgrade. It says these routing information changes propagated through multiple layers in our network and exceeded preset safety levels on key routers, which could not handle these. This resulted in those routers disconnecting from the Optus IP core network to protect themselves. And if you have trouble understanding what I just read out, don't worry, because I don't really understand it either. Dare I say that they might have actually made this deliberately confusing to give people the idea that it was just like an incredibly complex problem that no one could see coming. So
no.
No. Well, do you have a alternative theory? Oh, you're having a coughing fit. I'll just while you're getting over that, I'll just read a bit more out of this. So the scale of the outage meant that Optus technicians had to physically reconnect or reboot the system, and also meant the investigation into the cause took longer than they would have liked. So they took longer to diagnose the problem and get technicians onto it.
Yeah.
Said the restoration required a large-scale effort of the team and in some cases required Optus to reconnect or reboot routers physically, requiring the dispatch of people across a number of sites in Australia. This is why restoration was progressive over the afternoon. Yeah, people kind of slowly got their coverage back.
I love transitioning to a cashless era where my only ability to transfer cash is using the internet.
Yeah, well, also, I don't think have they offered anything besides the free 200 gig of free data. I don't think they
I
have.
haven't seen shit.
Yeah, I don't think they have. Uh, and as I pointed out last week, what if you're on an unlimited plan? That means you get no compensation whatsoever. That means nothing to you. Not to mention a lot of the other people, even if they're not on unlimited, just don't need 200 gig of data. I mean, like I know that on my phone, I have never ever exceeded my data limit ever.
I've got 80 gigs, and I'm literally a fucking phone junkie, and it's probably a problem for me. But like I have never gone over 80 gigs. I'm not
That's a lot,
like
man, for a phone.
who the fuck is going over fucking like 80 gigs? Is there some dude just downloading like fucking high quality definition porn videos all day? Don't
See,
answer
that's
that.
the
That
weird
probably
thing.
is.
If you do that, usually people are doing that on their laptop or their PC, not on their phone.
Yeah.
Your phone is not really supposed to be that, but whatever. Um, okay. So we do have some announcements from Claire O'Neill, who is the Home Affairs Minister. So she's the minister who is responsible for overlooking cybersecurity. And she's saying that telecommunication companies will be hit with new rules, forcing them to update the federal government on their cybersecurity regimes. Now, this is actually related to the cyber attack on Optus last year, not the network outage. So, as we know, pretty much everyone there every Optus customer had their data compromised. They had it accessed. They said it was up for sale on the dark web as well, things like that.
Wouldn't be surprising.
So the laws would classify telecommunication companies as critical infrastructure, which will require company boards to report to the government on their cybersecurity strategies in the same way that energy companies, hospitals, and ports do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
You,
basically like the government saying, "Tell us what you're doing because we need to be 100% certain that you're not going to be subjected to a serious cyber attack and shut down."
oh no, like literally like what was the war game called that America did in like the early aughts? The one where they war gamed against Iran, and then some like Marine general or Marine commander basically like fucking trounced them using Stone Age tech. Um, but like their plan of attack was quite literally like shut down their ports, fucking like bomb their fucking hospitals, and shut down their internet.
Right. Well, that's not a bad. That'll work at least, won't it?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, we're seeing it being used right now, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it definitely makes sense to classify telecommunications as critical infrastructure because, well, as we discussed last week, some people weren't able to call an ambulance because their Optus service was out. So, of course, it
And
is.
and
Like,
and the worst thing, if there was no internet in this country, if all the ISPs were down, you couldn't get this show, and that should matter the world to you.
yeah, that's right. Okay. Um, so, yeah, speaking of cyber attacks, there was a large one on uh, DP World. No, the DP does not stand for
Yeah,
what you might think. So they are
I
Australia's
had to tell
second
this to
largest.
Rand. He found it very amusing.
Okay. So look, they're a port company, meaning sea containers. They're the second largest in Australia, actually, um, and it actually temporarily shut them down. Okay,
Yeah.
so,
Well, I mean,
so
I still love that the Australian government is praising the quick and swift and concise efforts of DP World.
right. So look, this happened last week on Friday, and it meant that DP World, who's actually responsible for around 40% of Australia's maritime freighting,
Hmm.
had to close up while they figured out what the hell was actually going on.
It's actually pretty good they caught this because they were the spearhead, they were the entry point, they were the open door, and if it wasn't for what I understand to be gross incompetence of the people doing the cyber attack, which is getting a foot in the door, then immediately doing suspicious shit rather than just basically praising the information they got from them for more weak points in the infrastructure and then targeting them all at once. It was only because they started fucking with where like shipments were going immediately.
Oh, okay. And so they
Yeah.
obviously caught on to that very quickly.
Oh yeah, they'll fucking like basically like it only took like one fucking dude or like a handful of dudes in the department being like, why the fuck are all of our shipments being rerouted all at the same time?
Right. So they didn't do the slow and steady approach. Yeah. Jeez.
It could have been a lot fucking worse. Could have been a lot fucking worse.
Yeah. So look, the government has said that they still do not know who was actually behind it. Although whenever anything like this happens, and we can see this in the next story we've got, the finger is always pointed at either China or Russia. They pointed at the Chinese government or Russian hackers who tend to operate independently from the Russian government. So, yeah, we'll keep you posted on that one. So, Australia's digital spy agency is saying that Australians are being targeted by more cyber criminals. Yeah, absolutely, that's true, and just scammers generally. Like, I get so many fucking calls, people with like Indian and Filipino accents telling me that I signed on to receive financial information or some shit.
I personally enjoy them. It's the only time that I get to yell at a foreigner, and
Oh yeah,
there's nothing that they can do about it. I'm not going to get in trouble for it. I can call them every name under the sun.
yeah. I'm not going to lie. That's exactly what I do. So yeah, I mean, I've made lemonade out of it, but it's fucking annoying. But and more to the point, unfortunately, some people do fall victim to these, and
Yeah.
it really does seem like the government is not doing enough about it because they're so widespread, and because they tend to be moving out of Africa now. They're moving from Africa, where you just had dumbass Nigerians who would come up with fanciful stories about marrying a prince or whatever. It's now moving into Asia where they're a bit smarter, and therefore they're
Mm.
coming up with more elaborate scams that are getting
Those
more
extra
people.
20 IQ points make a lot of difference.
Definitely, yeah. So the government has a lot of catching up to do, I think, in that regard. Anyway, the Australian Signals Directorate, which is Australia's spy agency, they just released its cybersecurity report for the last financial year. So it looked at the data breach at Optus, also the one at Medibank, and they are pointing the finger at China. Uh, I'm not sure if this means, the Chinese government or Chinese, like state-owned companies that we hear a lot about, but they are saying that a hell of a lot of it is coming from China, and they also gave mention, yeah, to Russia. Okay, so they said state-backed cyber hackers continue to threaten major companies and critical infrastructure. China was singled out as the main culprit for such attacks. Um, Also, hackers linked to Russia, often referred to by agencies as Russian speaking Eastern European criminals, have been detected targeting Australians too. Now, just going by like the accents and that of those people who've been calling me, I have trouble believing that, like
Yeah,
because
no.
the vast majority of like cyber attacks and stuff nowadays are scams, you know, not just the phone calls, they happen online as well. And I just can't see how these Russian speaking Eastern European criminals can be doing that much of the heavy lifting in that regard, you
Yeah,
know?
I've not got an Eastern Bloc accent during these calls. It's been like flips, Malays, Indonesians, and Indians.
Yes, yes, same. All like the most annoying fucking accents in the world. And also, whenever they call, it is just so fucking noisy in the background because they're sitting in a call center where everyone else is doing the same thing. Okay, so let's move on to Israel and Gaza. Whew, we got some beauties in here today. Okay, so on Sunday, Penny Wong, our federal foreign minister, appeared on Insiders. They talked about a number of issues, but they eventually got to Israel Gaza, which, of course, a lot of people, that was really all they cared about, questioning her over that. Now, contrary to what some people are saying, she did not actually call for an outright ceasefire. She was actually a lot more mealy-mouthed about it, saying that Israel should take the necessary steps towards a ceasefire. So, you see, this is that balancing act that they're trying to do at the moment. I mean, look, Penny Wong's a senator, so she doesn't represent an electorate, only a state. But you do know that other people, say like Tony Burke, Chris Bowen, etc., have a shitload of Muslims in their electorates. So, it is true to an extent that Labor, at least in its rhetoric, is only somewhat critical of Israel. And I suspect that's simply just to kind of dial down the red hot anger that is out there among Arabs and Muslims in Australia, Islamic diasporas, in other words.
Thank you, Israeli NGOs. Thank you for this. I love seeing your ethnic conflict spill out in my streets.
Oh yeah, I know, and it's escalating at the moment. We got a few examples. So look, Albo refused to actually back a formal call for a ceasefire. He did emphasize, though, that that's not exactly what Penny Wong said. She just said the necessary steps towards a ceasefire.
I don't support a ceasefire.
You want him to keep going?
Yeah.
I think the death toll.
Other Arab countries to join in.
It's nearing 12,000 now, isn't it?
Yep. Yeah, it is.
About 40% of which are children.
Yep. Well. I want everyone. I want this to be such a fucking absolute shit show of an event that no Zionist, Jewish, Israeli, whatever fucking term you want to use, speaker can pull the moral high ground on anyone ever.
Yeah, well, look, the other point that Penny Wong made, and this was a fair point actually, was that Israel is a democracy, so-called, and if Israel wants to present itself as a democracy, that means it has to actually abide by humanitarian law. On the other hand, she called Hamas a terrorist organization, and so therefore we would not expect to hold them to higher standards. Now, I know we can quibble about the definitions here and whether or not they're a real democracy and whatever it is. But
it doesn't matter. What they are as a Jewish state, that should be enough for you.
Sure, but, what they try to do in terms of winning the PR war is just always say, well, look, Israel is a democratic or a liberal democratic nation that loves freedom, whereas all these other ones are, despotic hellhole regimes. So
stop trying to sell me on your enemy, man. You're doing it all wrong.
But I just mean, I think now, like I don't know if I said this last week, but I think we may well be seeing the beginning of the end of the Jewish state, like right before our eyes.
Oh yeah,
we're seeing it in real time, and one of the reasons for that is because now they're losing the support of the international community, even in Australia, even in America, the West largely. And the reason for that is that it's hard to imagine Israel as a liberal democracy when you have 12,000 civilian deaths already, when the attack on them killed around 1,200. And it doesn't look like Israel. I mean, they just did an operation in a hospital after they bombed one.
God.
And they bombed several refugee centers. So it is very, very hard to present yourself to the rest of the world as a liberal democracy.
And get caught lying when you try and make atrocity propaganda over and over again. My God, does it take a fucking genius to know that you wouldn't fucking store weapons in the same room as a functional MRI?
Of course. And I mean, that's it. They're not fooling people anymore. These are, bald-faced lies that are easy to see through. And that's why they're losing the PR war. Just like when they were seizing Palestinian houses and you had that guy saying,
Oh god, that was
if I don't steal it, someone else will. That was very embarrassing for Israel, and they had to kind of quickly, make sure there
yeah.
weren't incidents like that happening again.
Oh no,
And
they banned all media, even their own, going into was it Shea Jarrah or whatever the fuck that place is called again.
right, right,
They they
yeah,
ban they banned media going to fucking settler regions because they know no matter who is holding the fucking camera, no matter which way they spin it, it's so grotesque that it's gonna look bad for them.
hmm,
God, they could have fucking like fucking settlers blowing bubbles and handing up free ponies to fucking
right, right.
little Arab kids, and it would still look fucking bad.
So, look, I mean, what you're describing there is, we all know the thing about Jignats versus optics Jews. We're on YouTube, so I won't say what I usually would say there. Uh,
Yeah,
so, yeah, I mean, they were able to rein it in so that the PR campaign would go a bit better for them with what you just talked about. Right now, the optics Jews are right there with the Jignats. Even the
yeah,
more kind of so-called secular liberal Jews are out there
just
just
as
baying
bloodthirsty.
for yes, yes, they're out there just they want Arab blood at the moment. So that means they don't have that same kind of restraint from the optics Jews as they
No,
previously did. And if you ask me, that was part of Hamas's plan. You
yeah.
know, to actually show that actually sometimes Jews do behave like a monolith and they do all just want
Well,
the same thing. And in this case, that means the extermination of Arabs in Gaza.
you're looking at a people who haven't morally evolved since fucking warring Bronze Age tribes and fucking like burning like taking the enemy tribe's children and fucking bashing their skulls against rocks. Like it's that level of morality we're dealing with. This isn't even fucking Old Testament, buddy. This is Torah. And yes, they are different, by the way. The Torah is a lot more brutal.
Well, the Torah is basically just the Old Testament, isn't it?
It's the Old Testament plus, basically. There's a lot of stuff that was omitted from the Old Testament, and it didn't used to be, by the way, and that's why a lot of middle reform Christianity delved into anti-Semitism quite a bit because imagine trying to defend a lot of people who well you get extra stories like, for example, the one where like Jews tricked a warring tribe that they wanted peace, and we're going to join up, we're going to intermarry, like etc. But like we got this one custom that like you have to do for us, and then we're going to end the bloodshed. It's all going to be over. We can all ride happily together into the sunset. You just need to circumcise yourself. And while the men were recovering from the circumcision, they came in and slaughtered them.
Right. Um,
Shit like
so look,
that.
Jewish leaders in Australia, and to show that yes, they are acting like a monolith, are basically all saying that a ceasefire would be the equivalent of surrender to Hamas. And look, while they're not outright calling Penny Wong an anti-Semite, they might as well be. They say that they're giving cover to Hamas and effectively don't support Israel's right to defend itself. It's a funny looking defense. Um, so I mentioned before that one of the reasons why Peter Dutton wants Parliament to sit overtime is because of what he says is the rise of anti Semitism in Australia. Now, Albo said in the Parliament that Peter Dutton is weaponising anti Semitism in the country and saying that his conduct is beyond contempt. So here's what he said in the Parliament. Jewish Australians are fearful at the moment. The sort of activity that is occurring is scaring them, and I stand with them. But it is also the case that Arab Australians and Islamic Australians and women wearing hijabs in the streets of Sydney and Melbourne are being threatened. And I stand against that as well. The idea of selective human rights is one that I stand against, so I'm opposed to any innocent life being lost. So there you go again. There's that balancing act,
Oh
you know.
God. Here's my moral equivalence.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I'm sure there'll be a lot of Muslims in Albo's electorate as well. So yeah, I mean, you do have this weird sort of uh, could you say it's sort of like a contradiction within the Labor Party at the moment? You've got these
Yeah.
conflicting ideas because Labor is just as beholden to the Jewish lobby as the Liberal Party are. But at the same time, um, Arabs and Muslims tend to vote Labor. And not
Yeah.
just that, but if you look particularly in New South Wales, a lot of Arabs who become politically active actually go into the parliament sitting as members of the Labor Party.
Yes.
You know, this started with the influx of Lebanese in the late
We talked
80s.
about this a while back with a good guest. Can I say his name here?
Yeah.
Yeah, Mehdi. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah.
it was a good guess. He laid it out, and yeah, and we've made the talking point quite a few times that like a lot of the political corruption that we see in the Labour Party is ethnic, and a lot of it is styled as the same political corruption you see in the Arabic world for
If we
good reason.
remember the faceless men, so these were people who came from Sussex Street, which is where like Labor Party HQ is in Sydney. You had like Karl Bitar and Mark Arbib. They're both guys of Lebanese background, and they were the ones who were playing the factional games. And Kevin Rudd doesn't like them because he blames them as two of the prime architects of his downfall. So that means you've got this sort of a new Labour Party that has a lot of Muslim voters, but also a lot of Muslim members and even members of
Mm.
parliament now. That is causing this weird sort of, Hegelian conflict, I guess you could say.
I
And
like
that's
the
why.
results, but I hate the mechanism in which you got them.
Yeah, but look, that doesn't mean, though, just because Albo's come out here and he's doing that balancing act just as Penny Wong is doing, that doesn't mean it's going to actually translate into anything tangible. Okay. I suspect they're just trying to make the Muslims in their electorates not, red hot with rage. They just want to calm them down that little bit because they're still always talking to the Jewish lobby. And Australia's policy position regarding our relationship with Israel versus Palestine, as far as I know, has not changed one iota. So,
Nope. Unfortunately, yeah, it is mostly just rhetoric and bluster. Although you're seeing a lot of kvetching about Labour's non-support for some anti-Semitism bill going through.
yeah. But I mean, as we know, Jews are always ever fearful about their grip on power slipping.
Yeah,
And so when they see the Labor Party, who they had used to have completely in their pocket, come out and use rhetoric like that, that is enough to worry them and
they
think,
understand that as soon as they're put into a category, it's over. And did you hear that leaked call with Jonathan Greenblatt?
no, I heard about it though.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
happened?
So that was one of his big concerns. He said that like support of Israel, like I'm paraphrasing here. I'm just going to make sure because I'm not going to quote him 100% accurately. But there's like support of Israel. We tried to make it like not a left and not a right thing. Like it kind of needs to be universal. And one of the things that we're really seeing, which is threatening us right now, and this is really, really, and he says really, 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 really a whole bunch to, I guess, emphasize actually how worried he is about it. He's actually talking about now it's an age thing. And he's like, it can't be split like this either. Like, it has to be universal. It has to be universal. Zoomers are using, and this is the laughable part, Iranian talking points on TikTok.
Oh no.
It's like, what the?
Yeah. Well,
They're
I would
seeing you for
also
what you are. That's what's happening there, Jonathan.
look. I would also add that Zoomers who are so-called right wing or whatever, are actually becoming pro-Palestine, some of them. And we know that for a long time, Jews have been increasingly focused on the conservative side of politics. I mean, all you have to do is look at the biggest conservative commentators in America. They're all Jews, people like Dennis Prager and that. So they dominate it. Even here in Australia, Quadrant was founded by a Jew. All right. So yeah, don't ever think Quadrant is too based, even though they do great
Yeah.
work on Aboriginal history. Um, but now, I actually saw the Aussie Cossack post something about this the other day. He was saying that like an increasing amount of young Zoomers, like late teens, early 20s, who are right wing in the nationalist kind of sense, perhaps not in the neoconservative sense of the word. So, in other words, they lean a bit more towards our views, even though they might not be outright ethno nationalists. They're beginning to abandon Israel and take up a more of a pro Palestine kind of line. Um, I guess you could even say someone like Ryan Dawson. I know he's a libertarian, but he sort of fits into
Oh
that.
yeah.
Who does really good commentary on this? He's probably the best commentator on the what's going on there right now. Uh, but yeah, like Jews are seeing that, and then of course they're seeing at the same time the so-called Corbynite left that
Oh,
Albanese and Penny Wong supposedly represent. So yeah, they're freaking out. They're freaking
I
out.
mean, God, I'm so disappointed in the left's anti-Semitism. I'm so disappointed. We saw it firsthand. It was mid at best.
Oh look, man, I'm not. Yeah, no, I'm not. All I just say is like the left will just do the things like Zionism is racism, or Israelis are colonizers, or something like that, and saying therefore we can't be anti-Jewish. And I'm sure most of them believe that. They don't see themselves as being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, or whatever. And the problem is that they're not connecting the dots properly. They don't
Yep.
realize that what you are seeing right now in Gaza is a result of Jewish behavior without restraint. When Jews
Something
just,
has been purposely stripped from your worldview, and
yeah,
they just don't understand that. Like, and saying like, oh, okay, like we're above it and etc. I'll say, yeah, we're above having stuff stripped from our worldview. A lot of the people who ended up where we are come from all fucking stripes and all fucking worldviews, and it all boiled down to this at the end of the day.
right. All right. Well, let's talk a bit about the demonstrations that have been happening here. So you've had pro-Palestine protesters stage a demonstration outside the Israeli and US embassies. This was in Canberra. So they're calling on the typical things like for ceasefire, condemning the military assault there. Signs included Albanese, you sold out, ceasefire now, Israel is committing genocide. So yeah, if Albo is trying to do the balancing act, he's showing that he obviously can't please both sides. So he's going to be attacked from both sides. But in a way, I don't know, that's kind of what he wants, you know? So did you hear what happened in the suburb of Caulfield
Ah,
recently?
yes.
So this is in Melbourne. It is one of the suburbs with the largest Jewish population in the country. In fact, around 40% of people in Caulfield listed their religion as Judaism on the latest census. And I'm sure a lot of those people who didn't would have still
Oh
identified as Jewish.
God. And they were praying at temple and they had to be evacuated.
Yeah, that's right. So there were an extra 60 police officers who were rushed into this suburb. They were there to reassure a fearful Jewish community about its safety. So there was a synagogue service that was to be held on a Friday, but then a bunch of pro-Palestinian demonstrators turned up.
Good.
The rabbi who had to cancel that service put out a letter the next day saying that this rally was motivated by blatant Jew hatred. So the police were actually deployed not just to Caulfield, but to St Kilda and Balaclava. Yes,
Yep.
that's the way these are also suburbs with high numbers of Jews. And you had a lot of clashes happening. So the one in
Mm.
Caulfield, for example, you did actually have somewhat of a brawl. It was mainly just pushing and stuff, though, if you watch the footage, between, pro-Palestine versus pro-Israel supporters. So, we are actually seeing real ethnic violence breaking out in Australia. Because for the most part, it's Jews versus Arabs, Muslims
Yeah.
versus
Yeah. No.
Judaizers.
I'm not sure if Ivy Yemeni himself is back in the country. I think he is. I'm not
He
sure.
is. He
He
is.
is. He is back in the country. Okay.
He's begging now. He wants
Yeah.
$25,000 to install a home
To inject
security
more
system.
heroin.
No, but he says his family is under threat now because of his
Oh.
coverage of the conflict. So he needs 25 grand in donations to pay for his security at home.
This is one of the incidences where I don't even have respect for an like I there's some instances where I see an opposition activist, I'm just like, okay, like I understand why you're here. At least you have the gumption to fucking show up and scream slogans at me. All right, that's fine. I don't respect him. And I remember back in the day, it took like fucking like 3 dudes asking the right questions for him to fucking tuck his tail, stick it up his own ass, and run away. I have never seen him fucking interview any one of the dudes in this fucking like sphere of thing for anything longer than 30 fucking seconds before realizing he was in over his fucking head.
I think
Guy's a
his
coward.
family would only be in danger of flying chopping boards, which we know Avi likes to throw. Um,
Before or after injecting heroin?
I don't think I've heard these rumors about heroin. What was he
It's on
said
his
to be a heroin
website.
junkie?
Yeah, he used to
What did
be.
he? Oh, okay, I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
it's on his website. It's on his website. I've known about this because like back in the day, like apparently he tried some activism while doing heroin like ages ago, and then he got clean and joined the IDF.
Okay. That's I don't think I've even seen heroin before. Like, I mean, to get hooked on that, you must be running in some pretty fucking dodgy circles.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, his brother still just as kind of dirty as he is, but like his brother is now like one of these leaders for like a Jewish security group in Australia
oh man.
or something like that. Something of that umbrella. Oh no, it's not. It's intelligentsia of some kind. I'll have to look it up.
All right.
But yeah.
Well, let's just go through more of these protests here. There's one that has been taking place on Roblox. So, massive multiplayer online games, MMOs, uh, are increasingly having either pro Palestine or pro Israel virtual marches and rallies occur. So, actually, I think Kuiper said to me last night that in the case of the Roblox ones, they're just shutting them down altogether. So,
Oh
uh,
god, that's actually it's gonna be hard to find the intelligentsia brother considering he has 17 siblings.
what? Avi Enemy has
Yep.
17 siblings.
Yeah, he grew up in a Chabad house, so that actually doesn't surprise me.
Right. Okay, so these rallies are also, these virtual rallies, they're also occurring in Final Fantasy 14, The Sims, Minecraft, of course, and a bunch of other MMOs. And apparently, the game companies don't like this. They want these places to continue to be safe spaces, and they don't like politics being injected into it. Um, well, you can't keep politics out, though. You can't keep politics out of anything, including at the dinner table. So we're only going to see more of this. Um, here was a good one. So pro-Palestine supporters converged on the Port of Botany, which is in Sydney, and they're claiming that they forced an Israeli cargo ship to reschedule its arrival. So these were people who were on jet skis. Other people were just by the shore on foot. They were waving Palestinian flags where the ship Conship Dax, I don't know what that is, but anyway, it's owned by an Israeli company, Zim, and it was due to arrive at
Invader
midday.
Zim.
Yeah, well, so this is a company that is accused of supplying weapons and other military supplies to the Israeli army. So, yeah, this is real like BDS stuff, where these people are actually putting their money where their mouth is and going out
This is
there.
some
and
real
doing
hard-hitting
boycotts.
boycott, divest, and sanction.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there was a pro-Palestine convoy of motorcycles. This was in Coogee in Sydney's eastern suburbs. And that convoy was then met by a crowd of 50 to 100 Israeli supporters, who, of course, went and clashed as well. Now, here's the last one in terms of community reaction and protests here. This man called Hash Taya. It's spelled
Hashtaker.
H-A-S-H.
Hashtaker.
This guy is a pro-Palestine activist, but he's also the CEO of Burgertory, which is, as you can imagine, a fast food joint that sells burgers. It operates over east. I'd never heard of it before, so I'm sure we don't have any here in WA. Operates in Melbourne, yeah. So anyway, this guy, he had like a question on Q&A the other night, and he's gone to a number of pro-Palestine protests and rallies. He says that he has moved his wife and his young child into a safe house after receiving a threat on his life over social media. Now, not only that, but after the death threat came to him, this was last week on Friday, I believe, one of his Burgertory shops was firebombed. It went on fire. Okay? The police are saying that they do not believe it is ethnically, racially, or politically related. So, in other words, they think that they do think it's an act of arson, though. They've acknowledged that, like, this couldn't have started by accident by leaving the grill on or something. This was actually an act of arson. Someone deliberately set it on fire.
Well,
but they're trying to tell us that it wasn't politically motivated.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Like, for starters, I'm not an arson expert. But when you see a restaurant and then there's like a fucking like a fire solely on the front and like internal seating area of a restaurant, what do you think that is? What do you think caused that?
Right.
It's not that you can see into the kitchen area. The kitchen area is not on fire. There's no grill that's on fire. There was no like oil fire that was left unattended or some idiot threw water on. No, it's the fucking seating and front fucking restaurant area. What is that? In my opinion, that's a firebomb.
Oh, of course. Oh, look, they're not. But the police aren't denying that. They did say it's arson, but it's just like I don't understand how then you could move to the conclusion that it wasn't politically motivated.
Well, did Tash Peterson become a little bit more radical? Did I not notice that? Is that something we haven't covered yet? Was it a vegan activist?
People don't firebomb restaurants for no reason. Okay, they obviously have some kind of motivation. This guy is an active Palestinian activist. It's pretty bloody obvious that must have been what it was. So what's going on here? The police are terrified of rising ethnic tensions in this country because it means more hard work for them. And I don't blame them for being apprehensive about that. But they are so afraid of tit-for-tat retaliatory action breaking out that they're trying to assure everyone that when you do have a large-scale attack, that it is not ethnically or politically motivated. But
They
I
don't
don't
want to
think no
get
one's
into
going to
the
believe them.
stochastic terrorism phase, and unfortunately, just like their incompetence in all other fronts except for fucking with us, I think they're going to be incompetent in this front too.
And this does show that there is a such thing as domestic Jewish terrorism. Okay, we just talked about Avi Yemeni complaining about how he's supposedly had death threats and everything and needs to upgrade his home security system. Well, what about this guy? Like, as far as I know, there's only been one firebombing, one like real act of politically motivated terrorism to occur since October 7, and that's actually been on a Palestinian, not on a Jew. So Jews are absolutely capable of pulling off stunts like this.
No, they've now that there's been enough admissions, yeah, they've got a history of it.
Right. So Peter Dutton has written a letter to Anthony Albanese, not only calling for, like I said, Parliament going into overtime, but also to have a national cabinet meeting to discuss the implications of the Israel-Gaza conflict. Now, as you can imagine, he did single out the fear in the Jewish community and the rising anti-Semitism, although he did also name ethnic tension just generally. No, you don't need a national cabinet, Peter. I mean, what really are you going to come up with when you do that? All you need right now is a good police response to keep things under control, and you need to stop letting non-whites in. That's it. You don't need a national cabinet. Okay, you don't need any emergency powers or anything like that. A national cabinet is going to accomplish nothing, absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Okay, so going to, I guess, some more sort of amusing stories. We had a Sydney Labor councillor who has stepped down from the board of a Jewish preschool after parents there discovered her secret Hamas apologist Twitter account or X account. So this was a Twitter account that shared views absolving Hamas of war crimes and refuting that it was a terrorist organization. Okay, so notice I said that this was actually a Sydney Labor councillor who sat on the board of a Jewish preschool. This woman is said to be Jewish herself, which is why a lot of people have been saying, whoa, what the hell? Why would she be in secret running a pro-Hamas Twitter profile?
If you're asking that question, you don't understand the literature.
Well, I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball in here. People might not be prepared for this one. This kind of complicates it further. She is not Jewish by birth. She actually converted to Judaism in December 2021 because her husband is Jewish. So that eventually led to her sitting on the board of the Sydney Jewish Preschool and basically being active in the Jewish community. And at the same time, she was running a secret pro-Hamas Twitter account. So I don't know what I'm just thinking here. Do you think this is a case of someone who, obviously she converted just because she kind of had to marry this guy.
Yeah.
And then once she got in, she started to really hate Jews because she started to observe more and more Jewish behavior because she was sitting in these Jewish boards and stuff at the Jewish preschool. And maybe she just got so fucking triggered by what was going on here. Maybe she just regretted this turn in her life to such an extent that she wanted to sort of blow off some steam on the internet and, post pro-Hamas stuff.
Well, I've got a counter theory for you. So, more or less, if Jews are finding opposition in a political movement, or if they see that some kind of movement or some kind of support is going against their interests, they'll try and get to the head of it. Now, her being born Gentile allows some level of plausible deniability.
Okay.
So yeah, like
Maybe.
it's just intelligence gathering and intelligence seeding. That's it. I've seen this 1,000 times. I've seen this exact same situation. You know, Gentile wife of a Jewish man creates like anti-LGBT fucking page.
Okay.
Yeah, like
Yeah, but look,
that's a
this
shot.
I read this earlier on the Australian today, and this was like one of the top stories. And it said like Jewish Labour councillor has secret Hamas apologist Twitter. So they're loving it as like they're trying to paint it more as a anti-Semitism in the Labour Party
Mm.
story more than anything else.
Oh, they're doing a partisanism. I'll be vindicated if that story gets no traction and, in fact, just gets memory hold.
It could well be. I mean, we can't say right now. It only came out today, but yeah, we'll wait and see. Okay, so um, when we had the big protest in Sydney, I can't remember what date this one was on, but you know, when you had the huge, massive one where it was like 40,000 people or so, um, you had use of around 800 police officers. I thought it might even be more than that, and obviously a lot of police resources. He's saying that the bill for that was actually more than $1 million,
Yeah.
and he's now looking to the Commonwealth to assist him in paying for that. And you know, these costs are going to continue because ever since the conflict broke out, there's pretty much been protests every weekend, every single weekend. And yeah, every time you've got to make sure you have the appropriate security detail to manage the crowds, particularly in these ones, considering you have protesters and counter protesters going at each other all the time.
So, are you saying that the bilking will continue until pro-Israeli sentiments approve?
Yes, pretty much. That's what's going to happen. Okay, now talking about we all remember the rally at the Opera House where they were chanting slogans such as "Gas the Jews," "Fuck the Jews" as well was another one. So um, police are being urged to charge those protesters who yelled "Gas the Jews" um, and have them charged under an unused offence introduced by the coalition in 2018. So this would have been Gladys, I think, back then. It's hard to keep track with how many changes that they've had.
Yeah.
But it's a section of the Crimes Act. And Nolsey, for your benefit, if you read the next story on free speech, this is where they kind of detail this stuff. So it's
Yeah.
Section 993Z of the Crimes Act. This is where it makes it illegal, basically, to make a threat against an ethnic group. And since its introduction in 2018, no one's actually been found guilty under it. People have been charged, but no one's been found guilty. So the Australian obtained some legal advice by some barristers who said that, yes, these people who yelled out "Gas the Jews" would likely be successfully prosecuted under those laws.
What are you gonna do? Charge them all?
Uh,
There's half your kebab shots gone overnight, buddy.
well, the thing is, they did, there is footage of some of them. They can be identified. They did also add
That's a sacrifice I'm willing to make.
They said that those who yelled out "fuck the Jews," that it would be unlikely to get a conviction on them because it's not a threat to say "fuck the Jews."
It's not. It's not like a direct threatening verb. Like homicidal gas chambers. Gold.
That's right. And so naturally, the Jewish community are calling on all these people to be rounded up and prosecuted. And we know that Jews are the architects of these kind of laws. You know,
Yeah.
they successfully lobbied for 18C and to maintain 18C for that brief moment where the Abbott government wanted to scrap it. So yeah, not surprising.
So I'm just going to put you in some shoes. You're a part of a ethnic organized crime group. and you leverage your ethnicity within inside a society to cause mayhem, discontent, and get your own way as a result. What kind of laws would you put forth? Just hypothetically speaking. Would they be
Well,
similar to these ones?
yeah, well, I mean, look, I think though that imposing these kind of laws and people getting prosecuted for them is actually just going to make things worse. They're going to be increasingly frustrated, and they're going to talk about things like selective prosecution,
Yeah.
because there are definitely pro-Israeli supporters out there yelling out similar things.
Oh no,
And
there's during the Caulfield one, there was the Israeli protesters started chanting in Hebrew a like basically death to your tribe, death to your people.
right, and I mean they're complaining about the chant of "From the river to the sea,
Yeah.
Palestine will be free." That's just saying they want a Palestinian state, but Israelis interpret that as pushing the Jews into the ocean. So, yeah. Okay. So, moving away from Israel and Gaza, uh, back to communications a little here. This regards the government's proposed misinformation laws. So, the communications minister, Michelle Rowland, is the main minister responsible for this. She naturally has taken a lot of submissions from various lobby groups around the country who are very, very unhappy with these laws, as they should be. So this is where basically, they would have like a new regulator that could shut you down if the news or the information you're putting out there is deemed to be misinformation. And government entities like the ABC are exempt from that. So, yeah, I mean, that should tell you all you need to know about it. So, one of the groups that have been very vocal, I know, has been the Australian Christian Lobby. I subscribe to their mailing list, actually, so I get updates on this. Not that I'm a Christian or anything, but I do think that in terms of applying political pressure, the ACL do a better job than others, particularly when it comes to stuff like this. So freedom of speech, religious freedom, and gender politics, forcing kids to take puberty blockers and that kind of stuff. So that has caused Michelle Rowland, the communications minister, to flag religious protections to be inserted into the regulations here. So maybe, if you were to put out something that said, you believe that the story of Noah's Ark was true, it would. I'm sure we would all agree, or at least maybe not the rabid atheists out there, that you should be allowed to say that, even if you do believe it to be, just patently false and absurd. Which, I mean, let's face it, it is. But you can have those views. I don't care. So there need to be some kind of protections there, so that religious people aren't persecuted. So at least now, with the amount of pressure that they're getting from the religious lobby and other lobbies, at least now they're at a point where they're having to talk about protections and amendments within the regulations to make these laws not quite as heavy-handed as what they might have been. Okay, so over in Tasmania, oh no, sorry, this is going to the High Court, but I think it stems, yeah, it does. It stems from an incident that came from Tasmania. So this is testing, you could say, the boundaries of free speech versus transgender rights.
Oh boy.
So this is a test case, all right? Like, this has not gone to court before. So this was a public rally that occurred in Tasmania. Yeah, so a Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commission, oh, God's sake, Sarah Bolt, sorry, is her name, this woman who's the head of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commission. She has ruled that the Hobart that a Hobart councillor, Louise Elliott, must face a tribunal inquiry for allegedly inciting hatred against trans women at a march that happened. A rally that happened back in March.
How can you incite hate against something that doesn't exist?
So, do we remember when we had Kelly J. Keane,
Hmm.
that British woman who
Hmm.
did like this kind of Australian tour and New Zealand as well, and then she almost got fucking trampled to death over in New Zealand. So,
Yes.
well, here are the comments in question at that rally back in March. Trans women remain biological men, and some change gender to gain attention. You can't be raped with a penis if there is no penis present. There's another thing that you said here. Um,
I mean, what? Inciting hate? Those are
right.
facts.
So, yeah. So this is said to have been inciting hatred against trans women. So a complaint was made to Sarah Bolt, head of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Commission, who investigated and has ordered her to appear before a tribunal, and it has elevated to the point where it's going to be tested in the High Court as well. Wow. Just over a few
Er,
things that you said at a rally in Tassie.
well, if the SEC won't let me be, the fucking ADC won't let me be either. We can't
Okay,
use that as a title. We used that joke before.
we did. Okay, let's look at housing. So, the head
Oh
of
wait. They try to shut me down with the ADC, but it feels so empty without me.
yeah, I don't know. I still don't really fancy that for
Eminem
sure.
lyrics.
Yeah, I'm not. I was never a big Eminem fan. I can't say.
What
Um,
you weren't a 13-year-old with a backyard swimming pool?
um, yeah. No, we had a backyard swimming pool when I was 13. That doesn't mean I liked Eminem. Uh,
Anyway.
okay, so moving on to housing. So you've got the head of ANZ, who, of course, they're one of our big four Aussie banks. So the chief executive, Shane Elliott, said that uh, the very idea of a home loan, no matter how big or small, is actually just becoming something that only rich Australians are going to have. So, in other words, more and more people are just going to be priced out of the housing market for good. And, you know, you're going to have areas in Australia where it's basically unheard of to say own an apartment or whatever. It'll be like in New York, where all the apartments are owned by a very, very small group, select few. And, they tend to be of a particular tribe as well. And everyone else rents just their whole lives. Yeah, I'd say that that's true. We also have the former treasurer. I think now he's like the head of Channel 9, isn't he? Peter Costello. He has something to do with Channel 9 anyway. Uh, he was saying that in terms of the cost of living crisis, including house prices, that there is really only one thing to blame, and that is runaway immigration. So, yeah,
Oh, there we
I have to.
go. Someone who fucking understands the shot. Now let's see the follow through.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, he's not in government anymore, and yeah, I mean, look, I doubt very much, even if he was, that he would do anything about it. But at least he's putting the right message out there. So he said that there's been a recent influx of between 500,000 and 600,000. Actually, more, Peter, because of the figures we gave at the beginning here were 634,000 people from January to September of this year. So it's even bigger than that. Like I said, these estimates were actually off. So
Australian
anyway,
government be like, I need more brown slaves.
and that was compared to the 120,000 people a year who were entering Australia around pre-COVID times. Okay, obviously it dried up a lot, but prior to that, the average intake was about 120,000 people. So it just absolutely rocketed up after COVID restrictions were wound back. And he described that as an enormous adjustment for an economy and implied the demand for an extra 200,000 homes, which of course are not just going to spring up overnight.
Yeah, it quite literally, like, even if you like mega rushed it, like you literally like fucking built a building to the quality you see when that like fucking English building inspector goes around and tears buildings, like fucking like tears apart construction work for how shoddy and shitty it is. Literally, it'll take about like 2 years to actually get a residential estate down, and that's rushing. Doing it properly
Right.
will take about 5.
Right, right. So, I mean, yeah, we literally can't move fast enough to accommodate that many people.
Nope.
And he's saying that that's contributing to runaway inflation. I'll read what he said here. He said, Australia has always been a migrant country and I've always supported immigration. And he has to throw the disclaimer in, doesn't he? And he says, but the levels of immigration now are extremely high. No wonder we've got rental shortages. What's going to be driving inflation in the near term? Rents. Yeah, not wages, not unreasonable demands by unions, but it's rental prices. That's the key driver right now, which is fueled by the population Ponzi. Okay.
Yeah, like
Uh,
no, our fucking rental availability. I don't know if you saw the statistic. Our rental availability is the worst in the fucking world. It's 0.9%. 0.9.
yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, I know a few like kind of anecdotes as well from what I've heard, and yeah, it's hard out there, man. Like for everyone, and it's triggering. And okay, look, just quick story here coming from the Yarra Council in Victoria. This isn't so much related to housing, but it'll give you an idea of how bad it is out there. They're actually going to make the speed limit in most streets in Fitzroy and Collingwood 30 kilometers an hour. Okay, that's even
What?
slower than the school zone. You know, the
That's
school
slower
zone,
than my idol.
right? So you're driving your car around. You're basically driving at walking speed or whatever. And the reason why is because the increased amount of pedestrians and traffic. In other words, urban density. More and more people packed into these tiny, tiny areas. So that you have to just slow traffic down almost to a standstill to make sure accidents don't happen. All right, let's move on to
Why
climate.
isn't why isn't 40 enough? Why isn't just 40? Just leave it at 40. Fuck. Fuck.
Yeah, I'm sure it is enough. Okay, so climate and energy. So consultation has been open onto policy options on the issue of carbon leakage and carbon border tariffs. Okay, let me explain what carbon leakage is. Carbon leakage occurs when heavy industries move to nations with weaker emissions policies. So, that could say mean they move from Australia to China. Now, that'd be a good example. Usually they'll go to just some third world country where they've got a nice, cheap pool of brown labor to exploit. So, this is deemed a problem because it means that, they can just go away and they can emit more carbon and they're not subject to the same kind of regulations and everything. Okay, how do you fight that? You fight it with a carbon border tariff. So that means those particular companies who are responsible for carbon leakage would have a levy or an extra tax or a tariff, whatever you want to call it, placed on their goods and services when they export them. So that's designed to kind of still make them pay, even if they try to escape, into another country where there's lower emissions or, fewer environmental regulations to control them and control their contribution to climate change. So yeah, every couple of months we hear about some new, like, environmental term crossed with an economic term to fight climate change.
It's all so tiresome.
It is. It really is. Now,
Why?
naturally, I'll see. Well, see what you think of this one, Nolsey. The other story I had on this was that economists and business groups at large are saying that they oppose this. They're saying that this will increase inflation, cost businesses jobs, etc. However, Australia's manufacturers tend to actually be on board with this. I assume that that must be because any kind of tariffs that you put on foreign companies or foreign businesses, in turn, is better for
Yeah.
domestic manufacturing,
Yes.
even if it is a bloody
Global warming
carbon
bullshit one.
border tariff, as they call it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go with this cynically, like not because I truly believe in what they're toting, but like fuck it, yeah, put a tariff on manufacturing. I'd actually like to see like shit being done here.
Yeah, yeah.
When I buy an industrial product, I don't want to see fucking like Mandarin characters. Oh, actually, no, well, simplified Chinese. They all share the same characters. Simplified Chinese characters on the side, like fucking detailing what factory it was made in outside of fucking Shenzhen or Gelo. Like fucking
Right.
Jesus. I'd like to see it in English.
That would be nice.
And then
Okay.
I'll get involved in it, and I'd encourage other people to get involved in the manufacturing process. And my field of study would be useful.
All right, so going to Victoria. So as we know, they have a ban on any new gas connections. If you build a new house, you cannot build a gas connection for your kitchen appliances. You have to use electrical appliances. Now, you have industry groups, stakeholders, saying that in the next 12 months alone, that's going to cost 1,300 jobs in Victoria. There's already been hundreds of jobs related to gas that have been lost in Victoria, in the ACT. They have even more punitive measures going on in the ACT. In fact, they want to phase out gas appliances entirely by, I forget which date, but I know that's a goal. They just want them gone entirely. So, yeah, and there's more pain for you as well. All of that stuff results in higher prices. And not only that, hell of a lot of frustration in the kitchen. You ever been to like one of those shitty motels and they've got those electric stoves that take forever to heat up? You know, that means everyone's basically going to have to use one of those.
Like I even detailed this out. Like say if you go like top of the line induction, it's still so fucking shitty in comparison to gas.
It is. Okay. So Westpac, another one of the big four, they announced on Monday that from the 31st of December 2025, it would prohibit loans from going to dairy, beef, and sheep farmers whose projects involve converting natural forest to agricultural land. So this is Westpac trying to show off their green credentials, basically. And it's raised the ire of the National Party. So we know that, banks definitely get behind social causes like this. And they'll try to show how ethical they are by actually refusing to give loans to industries that they believe are damaging. So here, of course, they're talking about deforestation. And the Nationals are saying that all the banks basically need to get out of the area of policy and just get back to being a bank again. So David Littleproud is actually calling on the Albanese government to intervene and use terms within banking licenses to discourage the bank from adopting policy. So here, obviously, he's primarily talking about this policy by Westpac, but he's also just talking about activism generally by the banks. Like
you do realize the first bank or banking system or something that is at least like a similar to a banking system was set up to fund a religious crusade, right? You do realize that, right?
So, I mean, it's sort of
Banks-
like they're involved in, like, climate change is like, fighting climate change is like a religious revolt.
It's no, like it's climate change is the facade. Like the actual fucking like actions they take against it are the actual activism. Like it's one of those things where like the what's written on the tin isn't exactly what's inside. At least with a crusade, it's just like, yeah, we're going to take the Holy Land in the name of Christ. Oh, what are we gonna do? We're gonna go to the Holy Land. We're gonna kill everyone who doesn't fucking take the name of Christ.
Yeah. And Westpac was actually, I suspect one of the reasons why they're doing this is because they were like unknowingly involved in child porn, like child exploitation material, like not intentionally. Kind of like when the casinos get caught out for harboring money laundering. So Westpac suffered reputational damage, and part of how they try to fix that is through social causes like this. So, yeah.
How about you just take people's money, earn money from taking people's money, and shut the fuck up? Oh, wait, you can't do this. Your entire institution is based around ruling countries.
Right. Yeah, so we've seen a rise in what's referred to as compostable food packaging. So, in other words, packaging that can turn into
Paper.
compost. Yeah, and you know what else I've noticed lately is that we've all gotten used to, unfortunately, those paper straws. You know, you can never get a
Oh,
bloody
God.
plastic straw, and of course, it just like disintegrates on you halfway through. But now, like they've even gotten rid of like the plastic lids on your cup. Now they're paper as well.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that. I've seen a coffee turn that thing into literally dilapidated mush in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, yeah. So the compostable food packaging. This is plant-based fiber and bioplastic, and there is somewhat of a debate in terms of just how compostable it is. I'm sure there is. So apparently, this is the new thing that they're debating at the moment because they are proving popular. More and more small businesses are using them to sell their products.
They're cheap. That's why.
You reckon that's the reason?
Yeah. Some
And
some of
it's
them with
also
like the custom printing and etc. Like they go for a higher price for like but the thing is only like big things like McDonald's and whatnot get the custom ones.
yeah,
If
but
you
I
go
mean,
to any small store, they're all using the exact same ones. They're made out of recycled fucking paper, and literally they're all like fucking like press stamped. And press stamping is like one of the fucking shittiest and cheapest ways to make anything out of like any thermal reactive material, i.e., paper.
right. But I mean, also packaging it as something that's good for the environment. That's actually a good way to convince consumers to accept an inferior quality product. You know, like people will accept the shitty straw that disintegrates in your drink
Because you
because
feel
of the fact
good.
that it apparently is good for the environment. So even if you have a cheaper, shittier form of packaging, a lot of consumers will just cop that on the chin and accept it because it's supposedly good for the environment.
So what you're saying is the dopamine deficit caused by an inferior product is balanced out by the dopamine hit of being a good person.
I guess you could say that, yeah. If you watch Penn and Teller's episode on recycling, that's effectively what they say. Because, like, people recycling, apparently they get, just dopamine hits from that, just from throwing your glass into the yellow bin or whatever. Um,
Save your glass for. Actually, I can't continue that line of questioning.
yeah. I'm not going to Fed post, but I would say, like, if you can avoid recycling, do.
Yeah,
Because
no,
it's
like
a scam.
there's
It's a
dude,
Jewish scam as well.
they only recycle metals, and then in terms of metals, they only recycle a few metals. And basically, when I mean a few metals, I'm just talking about copper and aluminium. That's it. That is literally it.
Yeah. Most of it will end
They
up
don't
in a
recycle
landfill anyway.
zinc. They don't recycle lithium, by the way.
Oh,
No, they don't. You know why they don't recycle lithium?
why?
It has to be in a vacuum furnace. That's very fucking expensive. And also, like recycled lithium, you're gonna get impurities in it, so it can't even be used in batteries again. So yeah, every single battery you've taken to like a designated recycling place, it's probably just been thrown in some field in Indonesia or India at this point.
Jeez. All right. So the Australian energy market operator AEMO, or AEMO as we sometimes like to call them, they've just released its summer readiness report. So this is basically concerning how much power people will use during summer. And I don't know what's going on over east, but summer's like already started here in WA. We're only halfway through November, and it is already like creeping right up. And we've already had some fucking hot days in October. So yeah, it's going to be bad. And
There have been days when my balls have been permanently glued to my thigh.
so they're saying the demand for electricity is going to spike to once in a decade high. And there is going to be an increased risk of blackouts and forced power
Mm,
outages across the country. So, part of how they are preparing this, it is called the readiness report after all,
yeah.
is the regulator would actually be prepared to pay big energy users such as smelters and refineries to cut their usage to ease the pressure on the
Mm.
grid. So that way, they don't have regular consumers missing out on, just needing to turn the air conditioning on. So they're just paying out these big companies instead.
I'm gonna put it this way, and this is it's kind of tangential to this, unfortunately, and I'm sorry about that because this is gonna be a long episode. But I have the time. Do you have the time?
Yeah, yeah, I don't mind.
Perfect. All right. Um, when we switch over to those like green decentralized energy things, or like that energy plan, we're going to see either responsible action, which is sending dudes, like teams of dudes, to every single substation and residential areas to make sure the mineral oil that cools down the transformers doesn't fucking catch fire. Or we're going to see the irresponsible action, which is they just shut down residential areas. And that's for the exact same reason they're doing these things.
Right. But yeah,
AC impedance is a hell of a fucking thing. You know what it likes? Reliable, constant power consumption and generation. You know what it doesn't like? An imbalance on either side of those things.
well, I was also going to just point out that, we were talking about importing third world industrial problems like power outages and that kind of thing. It's not just because of the green energy policies in a hot summer. It's also just because we have a more incompetent workforce now,
Yeah.
um, because we've been importing the third world. And so, yeah, I mean, like we've seen, there's been a spate of brownouts and blackouts in South Africa. And obviously, you don't need to be a fucking genius to work out why. Well, it's only a matter of time till that happens over here, because we're importing a similar looking workforce.
The entire premise of Engineers Without Borders, which is an NGO that I've unfortunately had the displeasure of dealing with, the entire starting premise of them was to go to post colonial countries and see if they can salvage their dying fucking like mid century infrastructure so they can still use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, just a couple of quick stories on climate and energy. There was a protest in the Victorian Parliament last week. You had a bunch of climate activists, those delightful people. There was actually only three of them. They were sitting in the public gallery, and then all of a sudden they break out into chant, throw banners over the top. And then you had one Greens MP, Gabrielle De Vitry, who went and took a selfie. So she got like the protesters and her face in shot as she smiled, tweeted the photo out showing support for them. Now, she should realize that that's illegal because that's a promotion of illegal activity. Okay, that is actually a crime what they did. So she has refused to apologize for it. And so the Speaker has actually suspended her from the House until the end of the sitting week without pay. So
Oh no.
finally, someone had the book thrown at them in the proper way. And I just can't believe this was, that would have been a Labor Speaker in the Victorian Parliament who did that. So I can't believe I'm saying it, but good on you. You actually did something right.
It's just a shame it took this long.
Okay, last story. You have some moron outside Parliament House at the moment in Canberra. His name is Gregory Andrews. He used to be the High Commissioner to West Africa, as in a number of West African nations. So he was a member of the Liberal Party, and he was also responsible for promoting Australia's oil and gas projects in the west of Africa.
Yeah.
Now, let me just really quickly check to see when this story came out. Yesterday. Okay, so look, as of today, this is Thursday, the 16th of November, he would be on day 14 of his climate hunger strike. So he's been there with his dog as well. So he's just like kind of camped out.
He needs to be careful. Hunger can do weird shit to a human being. It can even turn him Chinese.
Well, he said that he is going to remain there until his body gives out. Now, I
No, I'm
don't know.
actually serious. Take the dog away from him. I'm actually being serious.
Well, you mean he's going to eat the dog?
Yeah, I'm not joking.
Well, he's outside though. He's in public view.
I'm hoping that he careens like literally like with famous example of Bobby Sands during the last little stint of his thing.
Yeah.
They had to keep people away from him. Dude, hunger is a hell of a fucking thing.
Well, why did they have to keep people away from him? Because he was biting them.
No, like I'm not even joking. There's a stage of starvation where your brain quite literally like shuts down your frontal lobe, and you just go into pure survival mode.
Oh, well, hold on. I've got the audio here, so let's just listen to him quickly. He's got a very feminine voice. I warn you.
Since the 1st of November, I haven't had anything to eat, and I haven't put anything in my mouth except water or a few teaspoons of salt. I've lost 8.5 kilos already. I'm losing about half a kilo or a bit more a day, but I'm willing to do this for as long as I can. I won't give up unless my body does, or unless the Australian government make a commitment to real hard climate action. I quit working for the Australian government when I was Australia's ambassador to 9 countries in West Africa, including Senegal, where I was expected to promote a massive oil and gas project owned by Woodside Energy. And I realised that I couldn't live with myself. I couldn't do that and look my daughter and my son in the eye. And that's why I quit and came back to Australia. And that's another reason why I'm here on the lawns of Parliament House protesting for a safe future for Australia and our children. This is like COVID was. It's an emergency.
Okay, that's enough of him.
Yeah, that's more than a fucking enough. Oh my
so
god!
How long do you think he's got until he gets like serious brain malfunctions?
Okay, so like you can't go without water for 3 days. That's not true. You can a little bit longer than that, but you do suffer the consequences. For food, and I only know about this because I tried to fly helicopters back in the day, and they teach you all about like fucking wilderness survival because like a helicopter crash is a hell of a thing, and helicopters go to really dumb locations. But you have about 1.5 months tops. You will suffer the consequences after about a week. So delirium, hallucinations, etc. And approaching the 2-week mark, your brain quite literally goes into shutdown mode. Like it'll start shutting down functions of your brain, sometimes permanently. Now, one of the things it does shut down is your ability to feel disgust.
Okay.
That's for
Does that
yeah,
result in people drinking their own piss?
yes. No, well, that results in people eating rotten corpses.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, no, and there's been multiple instances of this. That one plane that crashed, and they thought that the plane went in a different direction, so they left the survivors up on a mountain for like, what was it, like 3 weeks? Yeah, they were eating, although like it was a relatively cold temperature and obviously no insects up there, but they were eating the dried remains of their fellow passengers within basically a week and a half.
Holy shit. So I would assume then that if, there's a risk of that stuff happening to this guy, the police are just going to have to arrest him in the end and get rid of him.
Oh yeah. No, like I don't think he's that committed. I think this is a stunt. I think he'll do like a graceful bow when it actually gets serious. But like no, if he is serious, no, they will have to arrest him. He'll become a feral. I'm not even joking. I'm not joking. It's been well
All right.
documented. You can Google it. You can look it up. Starvation does cause cannibalism, and basically like you enter a stage, just a mindset or like a state of psychotic delirium.
Well, I guess I look forward to seeing what happens here. I'm even more interested in this story now.
Well, to even look into Irish history, like there was some really fuck shit had happened during the
Oh,
potato famine.
yeah, the hunger strikers. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, like real fuck shit that happened during the potato
they
famine.
they were real believers. Whatever you want to say about them, like holy shit, you are a real political believer if you're willing to starve yourself to death as they did. Um, okay,
Yeah.
so let's move on to industrial relations, and we've got actually some polling data to go to today, which is quite interesting. So, 2/3 of voters polled across 15 marginal seats believe that big business has too much power. Um, they also support employees and labour hire workers being paid the same if doing the same job. So this data came from now, albeit this was a report commissioned by the ACTU, our peak union body, but they commissioned essential research polling to carry this out in a nonpartisan way. So that's why they chose marginal seats. So obviously, if they chose Labor seats, they would be biased. So also 64% of those surveyed believed large businesses have too much power, compared to 59% who held that view in July. So it's going up as well. So this means that by and large, the kind of industrial relation reforms that Tony Burke wants to introduce, and we'll get some of them before the end of the year, most will probably come next year, they are actually widely supported by Australian voters. Like not everyone who votes coalition is like anti-union or anti-minimum wage or anti-IR regulation. They
Yeah.
very often, are just voting for the lesser of two evils or whatever. You'll
Or
actually
maybe for
find that,
the projected social stances, which never
and
get actuated on.
and I mean, a lot of people on the right look at corporations as woke capital. They see them as enemies now.
Yeah.
It's not the left-right divide is kind of not so simple ever since the rise of woke capital. So also, uh, the right of workers to ignore phone calls and emails from bosses after hours. This is an issue
What?
as well.
What?
So, well, like people who bring their work phone home with them, and your boss calls you and says, can you do this? Or they send an email, and it's a good way because it's unrecorded then, the extra work that you're putting in, which, you're doing overtime work, but it's not being recorded and therefore you're not being paid for it.
Uh, yeah, no. If you call me after hours, it better be with an apology or like
Well,
something that
yeah.
I've done wrong, like something that is tangibly my fault or something like that. And even then, like, no, as soon as the clock stops, I'm not answering shit from you.
Oh, I agree. But yeah, this is actually what they want to include in the closing loopholes bill, because there has been, since the rise in the effectiveness of communication, which obviously today is instant, that has also meant a rise in unpaid overtime because of how easy it is for your boss to get a hold of you through the mobile phone, through email, through Microsoft Teams, whatever it might be. So they want to make it actually a statutory workplace right to ignore that call or that email, whatever it might be.
And make it protected from firing. Yeah, good.
Yeah. Make it so that your boss can't punish you for having done that. And yeah, definitely, I support that.
Oh, someone's complaining. Someone wants chicken. Someone wants liver. Meow mix, please deliver.
What am I reading here? Oh, okay. Just quickly, Canberra's public service has actually increased by 10%. So this was an article from the Australian complaining about the rise in bureaucracy, which I guess you usually do get once you have a Labor government come into power. And that has resulted in an extra $1 billion of annual wages needing to be footed by the Commonwealth. And apparently that is putting upward pressure on inflation as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess it would be, but
I had a
public workers are working
conversation.
like anyone else.
Maybe I did have a conversation with someone from the ACT. Apparently, they did suffer what's called an overproduction of elites. So what they were dealing with about 5 years ago was the fact that the sons and daughters of private sector workers there, public sector workers there, were literally just mulling around the streets and getting into shit that they probably shouldn't be getting into. For example, drugs, which might make you understand recent legislation about the ACT.
You mean they're doing that during working hours?
No, isn't. These were the sons and daughters of public workers who are unemployed because they're useless, like their parents. So that was the impotence for doing, this.
Right.
Can you please employ my son/retard daughter?
Okay, so in New South Wales, so paramedics there are involved in an ongoing wages dispute with the state government. They're threatening to what they call pull the nuclear option, and that is to boycott their professional registration. So, their registration as paramedics. That would actually take 1,500 paramedics off the roads in New South Wales. So, in other words, you would feel it. That would be a real thing, and yes, people could die during emergencies.
Not only would you feel it, but you would feel it longer because your leg is broken and you haven't got that green whistle for 5 hours.
Well, I mean, they're right to call that the nuclear option because that is,
yeah,
even
oh
for
yeah,
a union or whatever, that is pretty damn strong industrial action.
That is mutually assured destruction.
Yeah. So, 1,500 paramedics have signed an online pledge to boycott their registration renewals, which are due December 1st. That's 2 weeks away. So, yeah, it's getting towards crunch time, and wow, they better make sure they have some kind of a deal with the union anyway.
We're going to hear a whole bunch of unmended crunches if that happens.
Okay, so last IR story we have. More data here this time. This was commissioned by the CFMEU. So this found that 2/3 of voters support a ban on engineered stone. So, the stuff we've talked about before, which causes silicosis. So, yeah, they support a ban on engineered stone bench tops and would back the CFMEU imposing its own green style bans if the government did not act. Okay, so you have actually had already Bunnings has announced that they will no longer be selling any engineered stone products. But as we've covered here, the federal government is dragging its feet while they say that it's an issue and they want to deal with it. They haven't given a time frame on when it's going to be banned, which is what you need. So,
I did actually get some new information on this. Do you know the difference between bricks and blocks?
No, I don't think so.
Bricks put together with mortar make up a wall. Blocks, they put steel reinforcing in it, fill it with concrete.
Oh, okay, yeah, I know that difference. Yeah.
Yep. For creating cheap housing, there's an option to use engineered stone blocks. So the aggregate that makes up the concrete and the concrete base, smaller aggregate used to make them is engineered stone. They probably want to hold out on it until they can get approval for new residential developments.
Right.
Or disapproval or disavowal or whatever the fuck. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's gaining such a bad reputation. So look, this was, they polled 1,205 voters here. 67% supported a federal government ban on it. And then in the event that the government did not ban it, 70% backed the CFMEU implementing its own ban by urging its members not to work with the bench tops. And they're already doing that. They're saying, no, our members are not going to be working with that stuff. No way. As they should be.
Yeah. No, they're really and fucking truly.
Okay, so a bit of A news. We don't have as much on our First Nations friends since the referendum went down.
Good.
So we've got an Indigenous policy researcher, his name is Michael Dillon, has come out and said that the new Closing the Gap agreement that was made in 2020 is unlikely to reach any of its targets. Okay. Now, apparently, I mean, I still kind of doubt this, but when you had the Closing the Gap targets last set in 2008, there were 7 things that they wanted to close the gap on. And they're saying that only 2 of them were met, and that was early childhood education and Year 12 attainment. Now, that doesn't mean the gap was closed entirely. That just meant that they, reached a certain level. I have trouble believing that they achieved even those, though,
Dude, we need, dude, you don't need, some kind of, fucking, public service worker or any kind of, social worker, etc. You need a zookeeper at this point.
Yeah, you do.
I'm not even. I'm barely fucking joking. I am barely joking.
So, in terms of the current targets and goals, so they're for school attendance, child mortality, employment, life expectancy, literacy, and numeracy. He's saying that the deal struck in 2020 is not going to meet any of those targets that are supposed to be met by 2030. None. And you know what? He's probably right. But where I disagree with him is where he's saying that the government needs to go back to the drawing board and come up with another one. and another plan so that they can make similar targets. No, you are not going to do it ever. You're just not going to do it. You cannot close the gap. Okay, now this one I found much more interesting. So, an Indigenous advisor. Now, what was this guy's actual job title? This guy's name is Ian Brown. He was contracted as a cultural heritage manager. And this is on the Coffs Harbour Bypass project in New South Wales. So he was, cultural heritage managers. What do these people do? They're basically people who give an evaluation of a particular site, in this case Coffs Harbour, and come up with just how culturally significant that site is to Aboriginal people.
And an invoice.
It's a rent-seeking fucking scheme that, luckily we stopped it from ballooning out of control here in WA when we scrapped the heritage laws. But remember, it still goes on because we still have native title and we still have various cultural heritage regulations when it comes to...
We still have a photo of Marlborough leaving a communist meeting.
Yes. So anyway, this guy was an advisor to Transport for New South Wales, and he threatened to kill a senior female executive. Okay, so what did he say here? Apparently, at a meeting, he said, "If I see Rochelle, I will kill her." He said this to a bunch of other people in the company. Now, she wasn't there at the time, but the message was eventually relayed to her. And it's also said that he had referred to her as a white cunt. So what has happened to Ian as a result of a death threat and racial abuse towards this woman? By the way, she is, what's her name? Rochelle Hicks. She's a senior executive at Transport for New South Wales. So what actually happened to him? Nothing at all. And here's the reason that was given. Because he is Aboriginal and a cultural knowledge holder. Okay? Yes, Transport for New South Wales actually said that. So yeah, as you can imagine, this is a classic case of what if the roles were reversed. If you call someone a black cunt, obviously, you would be sacked without question. Instantly, even if the accusation wasn't true, you'd still be sacked. This guy, nothing has happened to him, and Transport for New South Wales actually said we can't sack him because he's Aboriginal. There you go.
I'd like to be a part of a protected race.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to crime. So, all right. More so-called revelations coming out about the death at Unit 18. So apparently some of the guards who were on duty that night were resting with lights off or watching videos, while Cleveland Dodd was trying to call them over the intercom and, was just making a general ruckus as he was apparently hanging himself. So,
do you call for help when you commit suicide, or you just do it quietly?
If you're serious about it, you do it quietly. If it's a call for help, then, that's when you tell people about it. I don't know what the hell was going on in this case. But, I have doubts it even went that way. But anyway, they just keep going on trying to blame the officers about this. And then, you read like the same statements coming from like the Corrective Services Minister, Paul Papalia. He's talking about how there are very bad conditions because of a lack of staff. Well, he's right. But why is there a lack of staff? Because the media keep demonizing them all the time. And no one wants to take on a job like that. Because the media can ruin your life. Now, something else, so this is something else that the minister, Paul Papalia, admitted, was that there was a tolerated practice of detainees covering up the security camera that's in their cell, right? So yes, every cell in Unit 18 has a camera that obviously provides a feed to the guards. It's well known that when they do things like take a shower or get changed, they can obscure the camera. So, of obvious reasons for privacy. So sometimes the officers would not monitor the fact that they just permanently covered them up. You know, so basically what they're supposed to do is only let them do it when they're having the shower or getting changed or whatever. Then they're supposed to make sure that the cameras are actually recording what's going on in the cell. Apparently that wasn't happening either. And this Cleveland Dodd had gotten wet toilet paper and covered up the camera. And that's why they didn't notice what was going on. So that's the other thing that they did wrong. And to add on that, it's actually the only crime story we've got today.
I mean, that's pretty much fucking it, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. Some education news. So, teachers in Australia, a number of them, are having to undertake self-defense classes in order to deal with violent students who have been known to use chairs, water bottles, and scissors as weapons in classrooms. So, Team Teach. This is an organisation that trains 8,000 Australian teachers each year in classroom management. They show teachers how to calm and disarm students and defend themselves or escape from the attack. Okay? 8,000 students, teachers they're training in how to do this.
Are they all in Richmond, Victoria? Or is there a decent concentration of them in Richmond, Victoria? I can take a guess.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's no question where this is happening, but I mean, it's not just Aboriginal students; it's also just other shitskins that we import. So,
how long until we have a resource officer in Australian schools?
I mean, look, this sort of in a way, it reminds me of where, some Republicans wanted teachers to be trained in how to handle guns and to actually have a gun with them at all times in a classroom so that they could stop mass shootings from breaking out. It reminds me, it's on par with that, where violent incidents in schools are just so commonplace now that we need to train teachers in self-defense. It's pretty crazy. You think about it.
Well, again, in America, we all heard the fucking story of the white male school shooter who's out to just psychopathically kill people. But we don't hear about the actual when they say oh, there's a school shooting every day in America or every week in America or wherever the fuck they pull that fucking number out from. I know where. It's literally fucking Jamal and fucking Tyrone from the block shooting at each other in school with handguns they fucking brought into the school because they're a part of different affiliate gangs. No one talks about that part about it, even though it's the vast majority of it.
Yeah, and I mean, look, if students can't get their hands on guns, they're just going to use whatever's available to them. And as I read there, that includes things like scissors, chairs, water bottles, just anything in the classroom that they can pick up and throw or hit with. They're doing it. Criminals can be resourceful when they want to.
Hey, look at prison inventions.
So the second and last education story we've got here concerns psychology students. Now, it's very often said that psychology
Physician
is
heal thyself.
Well, No, but I'm talking about the study of psychology, like getting a degree in it. It's like it is actually true that like too many people do it. You'll hear this very very
Mm,
commonly. People complain that like there's when people go to university, they're not getting enough like science-based jobs that guarantee employment, and people study
yeah.
things in the humanities and that. Now that is and isn't true when it comes to psychology. It is true in that like if you go and you simply just get a 3 or 4 year psychology degree, that alone is not enough to get you a job, right? You
No.
need something more than that. So I know that to be a clinical psychologist, you've either got to have a master's or a PhD, or you've got to have the 4 year Bachelor of Psychology plus 2 years of supervised work.
Yes.
That is the absolute minimum.
Yep.
Okay. So if you just have that degree by itself, it's actually not worth anything, really. You might as well have gotten a
You can dip into
sociology degree.
some you can dip into like fucking like Department of Mines and Industry with that, but like again, very few positions.
Yeah, yeah. So in that respect, the students who are merely going for the undergraduate degree and nothing else, yes, there's definitely too many people doing that. However, believe it or not, there is a serious shortage of students doing the supervised work. So that's when you get the 4 year degree, and then you do 2 years of supervised work to become a licensed psychologist. And also the postgraduate education courses like the master's, honors, PhD. So,
Yeah, I
um,
helped my sister through that. Like when my sister studies, it means that I study for her, really. And yeah, no, if you want to get a job, like actually get a secure job in the private industry in that general field, you have to do psychiatry, not psychology. So it means you have to do at least like a little bit, a tablespoon of medicine on top of that. And that's for the sole purpose of subscribing, getting people on legal meth.
right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's really the only difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist is psychiatrists can prescribe all of that nasty stuff. But as we know, like, when people talk about a mental health crisis, that's definitely true. And there's a variety of factors. We can blame the COVID lockdowns and everything. I still think multiculturalism is the number one cause of
Mm,
cultural
bowling alone.
decay. And so that means that there is also a shortage generally of clinical psychologists across the country. Now, some studies have found that most clinical psychologists are actually turning away 1 in 3 patients who try to get appointments with them. Either that, or they're on a waiting list for months on end. And sometimes these people are very, very mentally ill, unfortunately, and they need, they don't have time to be put on a waiting list. So basically, there is pressure now for the federal government to free up many more postgraduate courses and not focus on the undergrad degrees so much, but also to encourage more clinical psychologists out there to basically like take on graduates as it's like an apprenticeship, because
Yeah.
not many of them are doing this, where you take on the person with a 4 year degree and then you give them 2 years of supervised work, and then they're able to become a clinical psych after that. Um, so yeah, definitely, that's what they need to do. And I'd also add that the reason why people do psychology, study the undergrad degree, in a lot of cases is just because it's easy to get into.
Also,
We
they're
need to.
mentally ill.
With I was going to say that's another reason too. Is very often they're interested in curing themselves, which is why they take it on. Yes, but
Again,
no, I
heal
mean,
yourself, physician.
there was a time where psychology was just as hard to get into as law, for example. Now it's just as hard to get into as sociology or history or one of the humanities courses. It shouldn't be
My,
like
my
that.
Uncle A had a lot of suspicions about psychologists.
Sure. But anyway, I'm just saying that, like, they need to make it harder to get into those undergrad degrees, but they need to also make it very clear to these people that the 4 years alone is not enough. And don't take this course unless you're very serious about pursuing it, either in postgraduate studies or with supervised low-paid work after. They've got to be
Yep.
very specific about that and make it clear, because I think just not enough students realize that like the 4 year degree alone is actually not going to help you get a job, or at least is.
Go work for BetterHelp, bozo.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's just weird. We've got this very strange imbalance where we have a serious lack of clinical psychologists, but we also have way too many people studying psychology at the same time because the system is completely lopsided. Okay, so
How about like if you got a mental problem, just do what I do: develop neuroses and then also like engage in extremist ideologies.
yeah, right. Yeah, this is doing this I find is very therapeutic for me. I really blow off steam. Okay.
I wish we were on YouTube because I could blow off so much more steam.
So, political lobbying. So it might surprise you to know that the number of lobbyists in Canberra outnumber politicians by about 3-1. I read that figure and I was like, yeah, I'm surprised it's not more than that, actually. But anyway,
2
Monique
for the
Ryan,
back, 1 in the front.
Monique Ryan, of course, is one of the Teals. She's set to introduce a private members' bill on this coming Monday that would overhaul the lobbying regulations in Canberra. So the changes that she wants are legislating the code of conduct, regulating in-house lobbyists, not just those asking for clients, imposing fines for breaches, extending the cooling off periods for ministers and staffers of becoming lobbyists. Yeah, that's an important one. Like someone is freshly out of parliament and then boom, straight away they've got a lucrative lobbyist job. Publishing ministers' diaries. Well, that's going a bit far. But, restricting lobbyists from playing substantial roles in election campaigns. Okay, so I don't know. Probably most of those I would agree with. I dare say that this is Monique Ryan just kind of introducing a bill that she knows has no chance of passing to make herself look, more
Like
ethical.
she's doing something.
Yeah. Like she doesn't even support these changes herself, but she knows that it's not going to pass. So she puts it forward just as, a good PR campaign. And unfortunately, it may well work as well.
Oh, look, I helped. The guy pushing on the fucking truck bed of the car.
Okay, so moving to New South Wales, we just do a couple of stories on state and territory governments. Still on lobbying, though, the new government under Chris Minns has actually, they've been talking about banning political donations altogether, completely. But it's just been revealed that they have actually received over $100,000 from lobbyists in the lead up to the last state election that they had. So that came actually 3 years after the Labor Party argued that lobbyists should be completely banned from giving political donations in New South Wales. And then it turns out that they took $100,000 themselves from lobbyists. So yeah. And that's another example, They probably said that back then just to make themselves look good, not because they thought they could actually ban political donations from lobbyists. It's just good PR, but maybe it's actually backfiring on them now. Okay, so
why pretend to not be a shill? God, there's barely any punishment for these days. Like, fuck.
So Queensland Labor, Anastasia Palaszczuk, she's ordered secret taxpayer-funded polling of Queenslanders to basically gauge their support for various policies in the lead up to the next election, which is actually only a few months away. So these there were documents that were obtained by the Australian. They did so under the Freedom of Information laws. And it reveals that Palaszczuk's department launched one of the state's biggest polling projects. It will run for 66 weeks ahead of the election. It's in October, sorry. So a bit more than a few months away. So this is going to cost taxpayers almost $400,000. It's said to kind of happen in waves every 6 weeks or so, and includes things like opinion polling and other forms of gaining data. So they've been very secretive about this. They never announced this publicly, by the way. It's only because the Australian got hold of these documents that they know about it. So the government is refusing to reveal what specific topics are going to be canvassed with the voters that they survey, or what the research findings are going to be. So this is basically just using taxpayer dollars to do political polling on the Queensland electorate. Now, all parties, of course, engage in forms of political polling, but they use their own funds, their own electoral funding or money in their coffers to actually fund that. She's actually just taken almost $500,000 out of the taxpayer to fund this herself. It looks very much like the red shirt scandal in Victoria. So, yeah, they're getting so desperate because I think they're going to lose that election. I think they are as well. But yeah,
it seemed like enough.
Anastasia is the only kind of like Labor premier who actually wants to hold on for the long term. So she's resorting to methods like that. Okay. So she is losing a third member for the next state election. So that's the Rockhampton MP, Barry O'Rourke. I would say there's probably more to come because, well, they're abandoning a sinking ship because, like I said, they're probably going to lose. Now, last thing
why
on
spend money on a fucked election?
There's one way that they can win, okay? And the Greens know this. And that is actually have a possible alliance or form a coalition with the Greens because the Greens are expected to do well in this election. One of the reasons being, well, they actually did quite well in Queensland in the federal election. In fact, they actually picked up 2 inner city seats. Very surprising. Most people just thought they would just get the seat of Melbourne with Adam Bant. But no, they actually got 2 Queensland seats. And the reason for that, I guess, is because of the increased hipsterization of inner city Brisbane, basically.
Yeah.
So
it went from a strict economic zone to now like there's been enough money flowing around for poppers and MDMA and lidocaine infused lubricant. So yeah.
Right. So the Queensland Greens know that. Even though Palaszczuk has said that no, this is not something she would do, the Greens are basically saying no, she would. If her back's against the wall and the only way she could form government is to go into alliance with us, then she would do it. And I agree. I mean, that's exactly what they've done in Tasmania. They did it in the ACT. They even did it federally. Remember, Julia Gillard had a kind of alliance, not a coalition, but an alliance with Bob Brown back in 2010. So of course,
but also like what as an institutional Labor person, like why the fuck wouldn't you do it? You can get like a retard voter base that will get you the percentages you need, and you've got a party that you're allied with that you can just bully the fuck around.
Yeah, well, look, it still makes sense for her to talk like that because you want to talk about how confident you are to win a majority in your own right and not have to rely on minor parties. I don't believe her for a second when she says she wouldn't.
I hope that Greens voters put up their bodies for science. So, in my ideal future, we could study their brains to figure out why they're so retarded and possibly fix this in the future.
Well, anyway, the Greens are saying, of course, if they were to go into an alliance, the Greens are going to want something out of it. And they seem to be pushing the rights of renters, funnily enough. So, the federal Greens were already kind of doing this, where they kept rejecting the government's housing bill, saying more money needed to be put into social housing, but they also wanted widespread rent controls as well. So they're sort of making rent their flagship economic issue. They're not really talking about anything else. And they're certainly not talking about the main pressures that are driving rent prices up. In fact, they're just promoting all of those pressures to increase through increased immigration and whatnot. But yeah, it looks like if you were to see the return of Labor in alliance with the Greens, you're likely to see rent controls occur. Probably in Brisbane and other areas of Queensland, that in the long term actually will just push the rent prices up. Anyway.
Don't believe in Bollywood stories? Well, guess what? You're in one.
Okay. Last story at the state and territory levels. We're going to go to the ACT, our favourite jurisdiction. And, well, we've got a very interesting story here regarding a Greens backbencher in the Legislative Assembly by the name of Jonathan Davis.
This one.
Not the singer from Korn, but a 31-year-old Greens backbencher who is actually not a Greens backbencher anymore. He had to resign.
Why is that, Finian?
Yeah, well, I'll just give these details first. He had to resign from the Greens, and then shortly afterwards, he actually resigned from the ACT Parliament. He's gone altogether. His political
Sorry
career.
for jumping down your throat, but I imagine that someone else has already done that too.
So, all right, what did this guy do? What did Jonathan Davis do? He had an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old. So, the Greens, the ACT Greens, conducted their own internal investigation into this. Now, it was rumoured that apparently he had a relationship with a 16-year-old boy as well. That's one of the other things that I have read. But this internal investigation by the ACT Greens only really concerned this one guy who is now 18 years old, but alleged that he had sex, albeit consensual sex, with Jonathan Davis on several occasions while he was 17. How did that come about? Well, Jonathan Davis is actually a guy who was known in the ACT LGBTIQ plus community as apparently particularly known to have a preference for younger adults. Okay, so this was part of the Greens' own internal investigation. He was known within the gay community to have a preference for younger adults. They also found that when he was using Grindr, he was on Grindr trying to. You think he would have been smart enough?
He also performs
to have
as a drag queen on occasion.
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he actually set the age filter when searching for matches as between 18 and 19. So he wouldn't match with anyone above the age of 19. And when it came to this guy who was 17 at the time, this is a guy who actually just lied about his age so that he could use Grindr. And eventually he matched with Jonathan Davis and they had a number of sexual encounters together. Now, obviously, we got to point out here that the age of consent is 16. So Jonathan Davis has not committed any laws, has not broken any laws, or at least not yet. We don't know. Like maybe he probably did.
Oh, dude. Well honestly,
but so far, the information
if
that we have
was,
is no.
If there was the will to look, we would find it. I'll put it that way. But also something I brought up was that I brought up to you before the show was his tweets. He was getting really shitty about not lowering the age of the ability to, the voting rights age to 16, and he sent out a tweet saying ability to sign on for future service in the ADF, ability to like engage in consensual sex with your local representative, and also like but not the age to vote, 16.
Right. I mean,
Yeah. Again, like he was just engaging in the most purest form of gay culture. He was just cub hunting.
right. Now, look, I think the reason why the Greens swooped on him so quickly is because obviously this is associating the gay community, particularly the gay male community, with pedophilia. Even though, as I said, this is not under the law anyway, an act of pederasty or even illegal, it nonetheless shows a guy, he's 31, by the way,
Yeah.
having a preference for guys that young.
He was just
And
hunting for some young hole. That's all he's looking
that's
for.
what was happening. He was obviously a typical promiscuous homosexual out there looking for encounters all the time because he was on Grindr. And one of them happened to be 17 at the time. And that's only what we know of. There could well be more.
Oh no,
So,
16. Actually, there's now it's being called into question if it was 15 at the time.
well, yeah, well, look, here's the thing. The Greens said that their investigation said that this guy was 17 at the time. But I did read that there were rumors, at least, of a 16-year-old male as well. So just what I was reading from was just what the Greens' internal investigation is saying. But yes, there are rumors of even younger boys.
I just left the tab, but like they're on the Wikipedia page, even though they're being very generous to him by saying like, oh, 16 is the legal age, etc. They're posting a link saying the victim may have laid. Also, they're using the word victim. The victim may have lied about his age to get on Grindr.
Well, in the case of the 17-year-old, he admitted lying about his age so that he could get on Grindr. He admits that.
Jesus.
Now, I forgot to I forgot to mention there's one thing. If people would say want to defend Jonathan Davis by saying, okay, maybe he did have a sexual encounter with a 17-year-old, but maybe he just didn't know because, everyone's got to be over 18 to use Grindr. No, he did know his age. Do you want to know why or how he found out his age? Because he actually showed him a COVID certificate showing that he was vaccinated, right?
Oh God.
That had his date of birth on it.
God, this is some Netflix drama type shit. Jesus Christ.
They were more concerned about transmitting COVID by the fucking myriad of sexually transmitted diseases that they could possibly be spreading to each other. Hey, don't worry if you've got AIDS. Just make sure you let me know that you're protected against COVID.
Holy fuck.
Okay. Couple of other quick stories before we wrap it up on this.
I'm not a fan of gays.
On what has been, I told you guys, there was a lot this week to cover. So we hope we've given you a good show.
A large viral load.
So, just quickly on the robo-debt scheme. So, Bill Shorten, who's the minister responsible, has actually said that former coalition ministers, so that would include Christian Porter, for example, may actually be facing civil suits against them. This is because individuals who were affected by this and named in the Royal Commission, some of them had relatives who ended up committing suicide as a result of this.
Yeah.
Bill Shorten is saying that those people can now take ministers to court and sue them for damages as a result of it. And they would obviously be able to draw on the evidence from the Royal Commission to argue their case. So, yeah, that'll be interesting to see if they try to drag Christian Porter to court again.
They already sent the crazy bitch after him. I guess they can, send these people after him.
All right, so do you want to guess which country in the world has the highest rate of autism? It's us. It's Australia.
What?
Okay, it is Australia.
Oh, this would
Um,
explain a lot.
yeah, so it is. We also have the fastest growing rate of autism among children. Okay, so
Oh God.
seeing how this is coming out, it doesn't actually mean that we have the highest levels of autism in the world. It just
We
means
have
that
the highest rate of
we are,
incentives.
yes, and diagnosis. Okay, now uh, this study, just trying to, oh yeah, so it's by Crawford School of Public Policy. What they did was they basically looked at the relationship between autism diagnosis and the NDIS, which, yeah, is about incentives. In other words, you're much more likely to get on the NDIS if you've got autism. In fact, it's around 1/3 of NDIS recipients have autism. Very often they're treated for other disabilities too, but that is far and away the most common one. So
Finian,
yeah,
I consistently act retarded in social settings. Do I have autism?
well, look,
Do you think
I've,
I could
I've
get
said this
on?
before. If
I
you
need the
wonder
money.
if someone has autism, they don't have autism. Okay, autism, even if you're just a bit on the spectrum, as they say, stands out pretty bloody obviously. Okay, if you've ever
Oh
met an
yeah.
autistic person before, you'll
Oh
you'll know.
God, yeah.
You'll know straight away.
I've
Um,
met you.
but I mean, no,
Joking
when I
aside.
meet a guy, like, because you will hear, particularly younger guys, they might say, "Oh, I must be like a little bit on the spectrum because sometimes I have trouble holding a conversation or something like that." It's like, no, that's
No,
you mean
that's
you,
not
you
it.
have like a little bit of social awkwardness that just about everyone suffers from? No, you don't have autism. You forget it. Um, but yeah, the other reason is just because of money. People want to get on the scheme. People want to get disability payments, and
Like
so they're
it's Statecraft
incentivized to say it.
101. Make an incentive for something, and people will fucking come to it.
Yeah, definitely. So it's no surprise that we've got
That's
that.
it. That's the shot.
So they do need more stringent testing to actually see if people have it in the first place.
What do like one of
Oh,
those like tests from Blade Runner, but instead of like asking if a turtle's flipped over, asking the exact model of the train you're putting in front of them.
okay. So we have ongoing inquiry into the NDIS at the moment. This is mainly to do with cost cutting, because as we know, it's actually ballooned to cost $34 billion a year, much, much more than what the original budget was for. But this last week, this inquiry has been hearing from, I shit you not, advocates in the sex and disabilities industries who are pushing for a sexuality framework under the NDIS to cover sex-based support, services, and therapies. Okay, so the ABC, in covering this story, they
You
profiled
ain't
a
my
man.
bottom bitch, ho.
Yeah, this guy called Kyle Montgomery, who he became a quadriplegic during an MMA accident. And he said here, I have always loved talking about sex and exploring sex. But then when he became a quadriplegic after his accident, well, they don't write it here, but, basically it meant he couldn't have sex anymore, or at least he had
Hmm.
found it very, very difficult. So he said,
PP
it
no
was very
work.
tricky because I didn't know much about disability and sex. I didn't know who to talk to about it, so I felt very lost. So, these advocates in the sex and disability industry saying that there needs to be more information, education, and access to sex support and services for people who are living with a disability, and without giving them access to those services, we're denying them a basic human right,
We give you
and also
money,
and
or
also
let's
it would
take money for
increase rates.
sex.
They said it would also increase rates of sexual violence. So look,
What?
I'm sure I know how the fuck does that work. So look, we all know that there was that case that we always talk about here on the Racist War. Someone went to the tribunal and won the right to
Yeah.
get access to a prostitute. Okay, there's precedent for this, so it's not surprising then that they would want to actually push this um, a step further. So, for example, they had oh my god, sexologists talking about this, talking about how there needs to be more education, basically telling disabled people like ways they can have sex despite their disability,
Uh,
and that the current market on like sex books is discriminatory because they all assume that people are able-bodied.
uh,
So
you
we
know
need more
that.
textbooks that are targeted towards disabled people.
You know, back in my day, the first time I was born, like, if you want to have sex, you had to go raid the neighboring village. Um, but like, it's actually just mentally jarring just hearing that. I'm sorry, like, I'm having a fucking issue.
And by the way,
What?
as I said, the main purpose of the inquiry is on cost cutting, but yet at the same time, here they are saying, let's hire more hookers and write sex
Like,
textbooks for disabled people.
yeah, no, we're not cost cutting, we're cum maxing.
Oh, Jesus. It just.
Yeah, there we go. What the
Um,
fuck are we doing?
okay, so. Oh, South Australia's defence workforce is apparently going to double to 8,500 by the 2040s if the AUKUS plan rolls out as planned. That's a very, very
It's
big
not.
if. That
Yeah.
includes the manufacturing of those nuclear powered submarines in Adelaide. Not going to
That,
happen.
that that includes the idea that like people who will actually want to serve this nation still exist in that period of time.
Right. So, look, I mean, so what's happened is the Defence Minister and the South Australian Premier, Peter Malinauskas, they've released a report, or sorry, they are releasing a report that outlines 22 initiatives to deal with the workforce challenge, in other words, the skills shortage that we apparently have. So it's a plan to engage 27,000 students and 1,500 teachers across 180 South Australian schools to impart the science, technology, engineering, and math skills required to maintain the future fleet of nuclear submarines. Nah, throw that in the
Not
bin.
happening.
It's not. It's not happening.
Dude, one, you're gonna need white guys. I don't need to explain that, but you're just gonna need fucking white dudes on board that. And two, any fucking white dude with that level of skill or training or the ability to be trained to that level or to that station is not gonna serve this fucking country because he's got enough neurons to rub together to figure out that that's a fucking dead end deal.
Right. Absolutely. So, Barnaby Joyce got married for a second time. He married Vicky Campion, who, of course, was a staffer for the National Party and basically an employee of Barnaby Joyce's. And he had an affair with her and knocked her up while he was still married. That led to what became known as the bonk ban. That was Malcolm Turnbull, who basically said, okay, politicians, you can't bang your staff from now on. That is violating the code of conduct. I'm not sure if that still exists. It probably shouldn't. It's pretty ridiculous. But yeah, they've tied the knot, and they had like sort of a country themed bush bash theme at the wedding.
Well, he did take a bash at a bush, so
He did. So you've got a weird like guy running for council in Cairns over in Queensland. His name is Shane Cuthbert. He's done several YouTube videos where he's had a Nazi flag in the background, like attached to a flagpole. It's really, I don't know
alright.
why he's doing it. But this guy, the YouTube videos that he makes are like motivational, self-improvement stuff. Like, and the guy's just covered in
Alright.
tattoos as well. And for some
Oh
strange
no.
reason, he's had a Nazi flag He said that he wants to take those videos down or redo them or edit them out or whatever. And he did admit that it's a bad look. So, yeah, don't think that this is our guy or whatever. I don't know why the hell he had it there, but it's not because he's a believer. And finally, the Australian National Imams Council president, Imam Shadi, Al-Suman. If you look at this guy...
Something Arabic.
Yeah, he's originally from Palestine, or at least his family is from Palestine. But if you look at him, he actually looks white. He's got a red beard. So I thought, like originally when I saw this guy, I thought that wasn't his real name. You know, his name would just be Joe Bloggs. And he was one of those, because you know how gingers, redheaded people, they're the demographic of white people most likely to convert to Islam for whatever reason. But no, he's actually a Palestinian.
Rearranged ginger.
Heritage. So we might remember that the New South Wales government recently put together a Faith Affairs Council. This was basically like sort of a compromise in that they weren't going to pass a religious discrimination bill, you know, to counteract a lot of other like, you know, anti-hate speech law legislation that's gone through. So instead what they did was they gave the religious lobby this advisory board that advises the government. It's completely non-binding, by the way. It just merely offers advice. So anyway, this guy who is a Palestinian has been appointed to that council. But it is very controversial because he has made controversial remarks on homosexuality and adultery, extramarital affairs. And he did say that homosexual activity was responsible for spreading all these diseases. Okay, where's the lie?
I see he's a learned man.
Yeah, so, but anyway, that's like who they've chosen as the like the Islamic representative for this new council in New South Wales. So
I'm finally seeing something beige happen. All right, you know, we have to deal with all these fucking like random religions because like we live in a multicultural shithole. Yeah, like I guess the Arab representative, like you know, I do tend to agree with him.
Yeah, and stuff like that. I've
been to the Imam 6 times since we last spoke.
Okay. So anyway, thank you guys for listening to this 3+ hour episode. Like I said, it was actually a very big week of news, so we had a ton to cover for you today. Yeah, we hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you will join us next week. So thank you for listening. Racer.biz, and we'll see you next week.
Good luck. Thanks for the bread.